Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Market Open. We are live. It is Tuesday, August 11th. Thank you all for being here. Late because he's listening to Bohemian Rhapsody. Well, you wouldn't believe it, but I went on for a walk this morning. I came back home, got ready for the stream, and that is a song that has been blasting throughout my apartment. Dude, that song, something magical about that song. It really has been a life-changing experience discovering that song. So it's been quite the experience. But nonetheless, we got a lot of stuff to talk about, a lot to get into. We've got a ton of things that have happened over the past 24 hours, and quite frankly, I think one of the biggest things in the market has happened over the past 24 hours outside of the Leopold event, which effectively, I think, marked the bottom to the hyper-leveraged AI trade. We have something that happened yesterday that is going to bring up a lot of leverage into the system, but that leverage might be institutional leverage, not South Korean degenerate leverage, and that might, quite frankly, change the trajectory of the AI trade. There are some bear cases to it, which we'll talk about, but I think there's a lot more bullish than bearish, and so we'll get into it. But we've got that to talk about. rklb, asts, we'll talk about their earnings. We just got an announcement literally 5 minutes before I went live. Pakistani defense minister says the U.S. and Iran are close to a peace arrangement or deal. I hope he's right about that because oil was up 5% yesterday. It's up again right here in the pre-market at 82. We were almost at 72 last week. So the fact that we are up $10 over the past 72 hours is not really something we want to see. And so I think, given the 10-year is not at a level where we can afford for oil to get anywhere near that $90 level. I mean, we're basically at 4.7 again. This is where we're going to start to get a lot more announcements. I mean, Bassett literally said last Tuesday that we would get a ceasefire either today or tomorrow, which would have been Wednesday. It's been 5 days since then. We haven't had a ceasefire. So I would imagine we're going to get a deal soon, hopefully. If not, it is what it is. But it's time to get this deal, time to get the show on the road. And, we're at all-time highs on the S&P 500. One of the things that could keep us at all-time highs, we have CPI tomorrow, by the way. That's going to be super important. But one of the things that keeps us at all-time highs is making sure that we can actually, do what we need to do and get oil out of the way, and as a result, get inflation to come down. So got a lot to get into, a lot to talk about. Thank you all for being here. NVDA obviously is the big story of the day. We will get started with that. That stock is up 1.62% in the pre-market. You had a couple of our earnings that we will talk about. A lot of the semi names are not really up in the pre-market. They're kind of flat to reddish. So the announcement that we talk about, I think, should have been interpreted more positively, but it wasn't. And there's probably some reasons for that. Long term, I do think it's going to be more positive than not. HIM's earnings weren't amazing. Stock's down 6%, but the earnings weren't horrible either. rklb earnings were actually pretty good. It's just, once again, some of the announcements were a little bit lighter than expected in terms of the expectations for Neutron that has been delayed. And so until 2027, we're not going to have Neutron launch off, which is kind of what the street's upset about. SpaceX flat right here in the pre-market. Micron's up about 1%. CoreWeave has earnings today after the bell. We will be doing Technical Tuesday, so I will not be streaming the CoreWeave call. I believe Tanner and Roy will be streaming the call, but I will obviously be covering the numbers, and then we'll have Jason on for TT. But CoreWeave is going to be a big one. Nebius tomorrow morning. So the two biggest neoclouds that the street cares about will be reporting, and NVIDIA's announcement last night directly impacts those neoclouds. So we'll be talking about that and seeing how the market reacts to it. Some of your photonics names are down as well in the pre-market. Got Palantir, which is showing a little weakness, down about 1%. Then again, it's up 40% the past week. So if it normalizes here, I don't think that's crazy. I also think a run to 180 is not that crazy since it was 40 cents away from it yesterday. But a lot of the software names starting to benefit. Zeta, Rubrik, Microsoft. I mean, all the SaaS names starting to get a lot more love than they had in the early parts of the year. Kim, thank you for the gift to 20 memberships. What a way to start off Tuesday, 8:50 in the morning. Thank you for the gifted members. MJ, Mark, Reds, Shub, Pinball, Ian, Krusty, David, Stoney. You guys all got memberships courtesy of Kim. Birthday boy saying hello to Uncle Amit, turns 4-year-old today. Well, Mr. Birthday boy, congrats on turning 4 years old. It's a big age, big age. And, thankfully your dad has been working really hard to give you a very good life. And he's been part of the journey for the past 4 years. I know he's also been part of the Palantir journey for the past 4 years as well. So deeply appreciate you, man. Thank you for being here, and a happy birthday to your boy. All right. Sing for him a bit. Dude, you guys do not want me to unlock the singing bag. The amount of lyrics I have made up on the Bohemian Rhapsody beat, Trust me, I already have a song for when we have the next greeny green day. I have my own version of Bohemian Rhapsody, but for the stock market. I already have it. I already came up with the lyrics. I already did it. I did it over the weekend. It's like in my head. It's engraved now, and I'm singing it like every day to myself. So when we actually get like another 1%, 2% day on the S&P, you guys are not gonna know what hit you. It's on point. It's on tone too. It's like matches the melody, everything. So you just gotta wait on it. You just gotta wait on it. That freaking song, man. Why didn't you guys tell me about this song before? It's like, how did I live 28 years not knowing that song? All right, so let's get into it. Let's get started. Okay, let's start with the video. So I'll just let Jensen explain it himself first, and then I will get into my analysis of it. But yesterday on the market close, we were supposed to cover rklb and asts, and we got Jensen with 6 of the most important financial institution CEOs on the planet come together on CNBC to announce something. Here is what they announced.
A little bit about how this came together and what exactly it is.
Well, first of all, I want to thank all of my partners for joining me here today. I think this is the first time this has ever happened before, and I can't imagine a more important time to do it. We're announcing 6 partnerships today. These partnerships are going to pull together independent long-term capital to fund and support AI infrastructure build-out. This is an extraordinary time, as you know, because this is the first time in some 60 years that the computing industry is going through a fundamental platform shift from the way that software was done before to the way that it's going to be done in the future, called artificial intelligence. Fundamentally, what's different about this industry and this way of doing computing is that the computer is now part of the infrastructure, like electricity, like the internet. And so you have to think about it like its infrastructure and build it out accordingly. Every company will be powered by it. Every country will build it. And so we're talking about an extraordinarily significant infrastructure build. This is
with a very hefty price tag, too.
It's a hefty price tag. Each gigawatt is something like $50-60 billion. And so there's energy involved, there's land, power, and shell involved, and of course there's the computing part of it. This is, of course, also a milestone for our company. We used to build chips that we sell, and these are technology components that people buy and use. Mm-hmm. But now, NVIDIA's AI factory platform is really an investable asset, an infrastructure asset. And the reason for that is because it's productive, is revenue generating. It is fungible. It's used by just about every cloud service provider. It runs every AI model. It runs algorithms of all different types. And so it has really broad, deep reach and off-takers. This is a really great opportunity for us to build out the infrastructure, take advantage of an asset that is investable, long life, and productive. And with the partnerships that we have here, we can support a really broad ecosystem build-out.
Okay, so now that people have had 24 hours to digest the news, and if you haven't, then well, you'll be hearing about it for the first time today. Put in the chat if after 24 hours you are bullish and bearish on this news. I did a lot of thinking over the night. I wrote up a post on X, and I mean, I've got some perspectives on this. But first, let's just explain what he actually said. So what does Jensen mean when he says we partnered with 6 banks, KKR, Apollo, Blackstone, BlackRock, Brookfield, Goldman Sachs, to articulate this $500 billion of capital that is coming out of the $24 trillion of assets that those banks own collectively together to deploy in the AI space? What he's saying from my perspective is, if there is a neo cloud that wants to buy a bunch of Vera Rubins, let's just call it Nebius. Nebius wants to buy 10 billion of Vera Rubins. Nebius has all the demand because AI is insatiable and the market really cares about it. And there's all these different customers that want more GPUs, but they don't have the financing because of they can't dilute, equity raise, whatever, that they don't have the $10 billion to get the money. Jensen's going to go to Goldman Sachs and say, Goldman, you might not want to give 10 billion to Nebius, but you should, because here's why. And Jensen and NVIDIA present their due diligence to why Goldman Sachs should take this opportunity seriously. Goldman says, okay, Jensen, you're a smart guy. We trust you. We've allocated 500 billion along with our partners to be able to deploy into ideas that you think are valuable to expand the AI industry. We're going to give Nebius this 10 billion bucks. Nebius gets the 10 billion. Nebius gives the 10 billion back to NVIDIA, not all of it, but they have to, do a good amount to buy the GPUs, which is why NVIDIA is really excited about this, because they're, essentially generating the revenue coming from Nebius for their product that's not coming from Nebius, because Nebius doesn't have the money, so it's coming from a third party. Nebius then uses the 10 billion to buy the GPUs. They use the GPUs to make a profit on that 10 billion. They pay back the 10 billion to Goldman Sachs. They keep the profit in between. NVIDIA gets the sale of the chips, and that's how the cycle turns out in and of itself. Why is this super smart for Jensen? Well, he just secured 500 billion of revenue. If you look at the press release of this actual announcement that came out, a couple of sentences from it are really important. And this is why, dude, I don't think NVIDIA can fail. Like, we already knew NVIDIA can't fail, but with this announcement, unless it all blows up, I don't think NVIDIA can fail. The entire press release is centered around financing supply for NVIDIA compute, not Broadcom compute, not TPUs, not jalapeno chips with OpenAI, like not Cerebras, NVIDIA. Quote, a rich ecosystem of off-takers built upon NVIDIA's CUDA platform. The last sentence of the press release says this will create dedicated pools of capital at significant scale at attractive rates for NVIDIA customers. So NVIDIA is basically realizing they need to continue securing more and more people buying their product. And there's all this demand for their product, but there's obviously not enough money in the ecosystem if you're a small company. By the way, Riot just got a deal with Anthropic. That's why they're up 20% for $10 billion over the course of 20 years, which just goes to show that if a small Bitcoin miner like Riot can get a $10 billion deal with Anthropic, there's obviously a lot of money that's out there because there's a lot of demand that's out there, but you need the financing of that money to actually meaningfully bring in the demand and meet that demand with supply. And so Jensen, I think, got the idea to be like, let me call the richest people in the world that have access to all the assets. They might not be willing to give Iren or CoreWeave more money. Jensen has already given a lot of money to those companies as well, but they're definitely willing to listen to me. And if I co-sign these loans, not really because he's not like financially backstopping it, he's not really using his balance sheet, but it's kind of like in principle, he's saying, hey, we think this is a really good opportunity. There's obviously some risk, but like this is where you want to deploy your capital. Obviously, the financial institutions would be interested and they get to partner with Jensen. Now, why is it really important for the financial institutions? They want to build compute as an asset class. We've talked about this before. Larry Fink, BlackRock, they've talked about building financial derivatives on top of compute, just like you have derivatives on futures and oil and corn and real estate, mortgage-backed securities, all that stuff. If the world is going to run on compute, because compute is intelligence and intelligence is profits, aka that intelligence generates revenue, that revenue goes down to the bottom line, that increases GDP with the infrastructure investments for compute, and increases GDP with the productivity that you get from that intelligence that's coming from those infrastructure investments from compute, then compute in and of itself is an asset class. And I think these banks are like, okay, how do we make money off this? The best way outside of just, market making the stock market is what if we create a new way for people to speculate on the idea of compute. There's a lot of liquidity that opens. There's a lot of fees that open up, just like BlackRock did with Bitcoin and the entire crypto universe 2 years ago. And I think that's why the institutional investors are really interested, because Jensen's essentially giving them the playbook of where to loan out their money. They're in the business of, giving out money and trying to get some interest on it. And they're in the business of creating different financial markets, especially BlackRock, which means if compute is the newest financial market and we have a 20, 30-year trajectory on how much compute is needed to actually supply 8 billion people with artificial intelligence every day, then it's a very attractive value proposition for the banks to put out $500 billion. And for Jensen, he gets to confirm $500 billion in revenue. Jensen already said they have $1 trillion of visibility and backlog back at GTC. I don't know if this 500 billion is what allows them to get to that trillion in backlog. The market wasn't really that impressed with that because the market expected them to have $1 trillion in backlog. But if this adds to that trillion, and this is something I really hope we get an answer from NVIDIA from eventually, like if this now becomes 1.5 trillion, it's like, hold on, this becomes really exciting because there's this guaranteed revenue that was not accounted for. And if this is not accounted for, then this can become very, very exciting for the overall trajectory of growth. This is bullish for Micron. This is bullish for Nebius. This is bullish for CoreWeave. This is bullish for Iren. This is bullish for Marvell. Every layer of the stack, that 500 billion is not literally going just to NVIDIA. A lot of it's going to be going to NVIDIA because it's ultimately going to be NVIDIA GPUs, but NVIDIA then is going to take that money and pay for packaging. They're going to be paying for fabs. They're going to be paying for CPUs. They're going to be building all the, they're going to obviously be paying for memory, photonics, optics. Like NVIDIA is going to take that money and then invest it into the ecosystem. And then all the layers of the stack, part of the reason maybe Jensen said Marvell will be $1 trillion company is because he knows that there's so much money getting ready to be put into Marvell's products because the entire semiconductor industry itself is going to just go up and up. And obviously this is bullish for the hyperscalers because not only do you have the capex from the hyperscalers coming, but now you have another 500 billion of fresh capital entering into the ecosystem. As long as the hyperscalers can show the return on that capex, the market can reward them with continued gains. And then obviously all the layers and the picks and shovels, especially the neoclouds. I think this announcement is the most bullish for the neoclouds because they seem to be the ones that are buying the most GPUs from Jensen outside of the hyperscalers. And so he would want to effectively make sure they get funded and financed in the best way to then be able to then resell those GPUs and make a profit on their own. So that's the bull case. And I lean towards the bull case because of two simple reasons. Number one, I think there's an ROI on compute based on all the earnings that I've seen so far. Enterprise software companies like Palantir showing that type of growth. I mean, Palantir is growing for a lot of reasons, but part of the reason they're growing is because the market is willing to adopt AI. Now, Palantir is making sense of that AI in the enterprise, but if there was no AI, like that type of growth might not be there, right? You kind of needed the catalyst for this moment to happen. So you're seeing it in enterprise software companies. You're obviously seeing it in consumer use cases with Claude, ChatGPT, Grok, et cetera. And then you're seeing it with the hyperscalers when it comes to their cloud compute revenues. There's still a lot of questions that are out there in terms of what, meta super intelligence looks like or where agentic inference goes. But agentic coding, which is basically defined 2026, has been the biggest use case. If we can just find 4 or 5 use cases as big as agentic coding, which I think those are out there, and we've yet to discover some of them. Obviously, robotics is a big one. There's some updates on that we'll talk about. That could be very bullish. And that just means we're going to need a lot of more compute. It's not something new that I'm saying right here, but I think it gives context to the $500 billion and why these institutions were so excited about this. Very bullish for AMD. This is especially bullish for NVIDIA because it's all NVIDIA GPUs that are being bought with this $500 billion. But more money in the ecosystem, more ability for demand to actually flourish means every other layer of the stack, including NVIDIA's competitors, will benefit, even if this $500 billion isn't directly going to them. So it's bullish AI in general. So what are the bear cases? Okay, 3 bear cases I have. Number one, it's circular financing. If there's no ROI on the companies that these banks put their money into, some random neocloud that NVIDIA says, hey, give them $10 billion to buy your GPUs, and then the company can't really execute in a meaningful way, it's circular financing. It's just money going from one party to the other party, that money coming back, it's going in a circle. There's not actually value that's being created from the financing in and of itself. The second risk that I don't think people are talking about is, what if NVIDIA makes some mistakes and picks the wrong companies to allocate capital to? I mean, they've done a relatively good job backing neoclouds like Applied Digital, Nebius, CoreWeave that have done well, not just their stocks, but like they've actually executed on bringing compute online. But what if NVIDIA says, hey, we need to hit our numbers, so we're going to give some money to some crappy neoclouds that really don't have any business buying all these Vera Rubin GPUs, but we're going to give them the money because, we need to meet our sales numbers. They give them the money. That company doesn't really get up the data centers online. There's not an ROI, but the GPUs are essentially idle. They're not really being used. NVIDIA gets to keep the profit share from the chips they sell, but there's not a return for the banks. And if there's not a return for the banks, they get a little scared to invest more of that money, right? I mean, remember, these are just MOUs. These are just memorandums of understanding. These are not actual commitments to spend the $500 billion. NVIDIA also had a $100 billion MOU with OpenAI back in September that never ended up coming true. So, it was only $30 billion that they invested. So the banks can pull out anytime they want. And so if NVIDIA makes some bad decisions and the banks lose some money or just don't get a return that's attractive for them, that could also be problematic. Which means, the loans can default, all things like that. And then finally, this might just introduce too much leverage in the system. One of the things that scared me yesterday was, what's his name? Larry Fink was talking about, I don't know why he would say this, dude. Like, you didn't read the room, but he was like, yeah, we think this is similar to like mortgage-backed securities. And I was like, you have so many people already calling AI a bubble, and now you want to bring up the culprit of what was the biggest bubble in the past 20 years. But if it does get to the point where there's synthetic layers of financial derivatives wrapped in compute as an asset class, and then there's leverage on top of leverage, again, not from retail, but from an institutional basis on trading these derivatives of compute as an asset class, and then something changes what if something changes in the compute story? What if OpenAI and Anthropic go public, which, by the way, Anthropic's getting ready to go public by the end of September, early October. Wall Street Journal reported yesterday, which is going to be crazy because we're finally going to get to see the numbers. But what if the IPO fails? Like, what if they get to $2-3 trillion and they fall back down to $300 billion? Like just what if that happens? What does that do to the asset class of financial derivatives if the biggest spender of CapEx and RPO growth for the cloud companies, et cetera, their growth falls off a cliff, they end up falling by 50%? Like, what happens to all the leverage on the institutional side? We've already saw what happened to Leopold, where he was down 67%. If there's financial derivatives of compute as an asset class and you have funds that are levering up, could that implode? By the way, Value Research Advisors, the other company, the other fund that has 15-20 billion of just AI stocks, they were down 50% in the month of July. They are still up 50% year to date. I think it's like 62% year to date. So they took a pretty hefty beating along with Leopold, but because their gains were so massive, just like Leopold, who's still up about 80% year to date, they're still green on the year. So it goes to show how massive the gains have been, but it also goes to show the leverage that was needed to get those gains. And if you put that into a financial derivative that many people can package and synthetically sell to other people, it does give you some weird vibes. And obviously, if anything flips in the narrative, that could be bad for AI in general. So I think there are some obvious bear cases here. I'm leaning more towards bullish because I want to trust Jensen, and I want to trust that Jensen knows where to put this money. I think it will be very interesting over the next 12 months to see where does this $500 billion get deployed? How does this $500 billion get deployed? Who's getting access to this $500 billion? Are these like $10, $15 billion deals? Are these, $100, $2 billion deals? Is this one $30 billion deal to one massive company? Like, where is the capital going? I'm sure Jensen has a roadmap on where he wants the capital to go. And now it's a question of just convincing the financial institutions that it's the right place to put the money. But the fact that all of them sat together on CNBC together means that, they're pretty excited for this asset class to emerge and to deploy the capital. Being excited doesn't mean it's going to be successful. It just means I think all of them see the opportunity. And now we just need the broader AI story to play out over the next decade to make sure that opportunity is capitalized on in a way that's responsible. I think you're going to hear a lot of bear cases about this. I think there's probably even more bear cases than I brought up today. There's a lot to dive into and dig into, but ultimately, this is a fresh new $500 billion that came out of effectively thin air from the financial institutions into Jensen's hand that he gets to determine where it goes because he knows it's going right back to him. And by the way, for the people saying, well, Jensen has so much free cash flow, hundreds of billions, why isn't he doing this himself? It would muddy up his balance sheet. NVIDIA's balance sheet is pristine. They just increased their dividend by 25x, right? So 1 cent to 25 cents. They just initiated 80 billion of buybacks. They backstopped NVIDIA or Nebius and CoreWeave. I don't think they want to have 500 billion or 200 billion or 50 billion of commitments to all these smaller companies just for them to be able to buy their chips. I also don't think they would think it's a good look if NVIDIA was investing in like 25 different companies that would just be buying NVIDIA's product. I mean, you can do that for a couple of them, but if you do it for a massive amount, it starts to look a little fishy. So they're going to their partners and saying, why don't you guys do it? And if you guys do it, with our blessing, we don't have to take any of the financial risk. You guys are experts at taking financial risks. You guys know how to underwrite. We'll help you with the underwriting, and we get to just sell the chips. So for NVIDIA, it makes a lot of sense. AMD right there up a little bit in the pre-market. NVIDIA up about 2%. But it just has to work. And as long as it works, NVIDIA is going to 10 trillion. Like if they keep finding ways to get their product to be sold, and again, there's obviously demand for the product. It's just the financing is not easy for people to buy these chips at the margins that NVIDIA has. That is where NVIDIA will get most of the leverage out of this and the momentum out of this over the next coming years. So that's what we got. I think there will be a lot to analyze, but I do think it makes sense. However, if you get deals that just don't end up playing out the right way, this is the most important thing. If they announce some type of data center deal and like a year goes by and nothing happens with that data center, but that data center bought all these NVIDIA chips, you just start to get a lot of questions. And so the allocation of that capital will be super important. Last thing I'll say on this is these are companies that are now using 401ks and pension funds. The $25 trillion they have in assets are assets that are primarily owned by Americans in some of the greatest pools of capital, which are pension funds, retirements, 401ks, et cetera. From my understanding, this $500 billion, even Larry Fink explicitly mentioned pension funds and retirement funds yesterday. Some of this $500 billion is coming out of those assets. It kind of has to come out of those assets when you're talking about this size of capital. So we are now betting the Americans, the Americans retirement fund and 401k on this idea of compute as an asset class, which means it has to work. Like it has to work. If this doesn't work, because if this doesn't work, you have so many other different elements of the AI compute stack that probably are not going to play out because, if this demand cycle doesn't play through with the correct supply financing, you're just going to have a lot of questions about a lot of other demand cycles that are out there for a variety of different companies outside of NVIDIA. So I think it has to work. And I'm bullish that it will work, but there will be a lot to analyze over the coming weeks as we get more announcements from this $500 billion deal. What do people think? Bullish or bearish? I think yesterday almost 60% of you said bullish. 30% of you were like, not sure. It's too soon to tell. Probably is too soon to tell, but there are definitely bear cases that are out there and more will be understood. It's just NVIDIA's allocation of the capital will be the best way to delegitimize some of those bear cases. By the way, another announcement from NVIDIA. They're developing Nemotron 4, an open source AI model whose largest version is expected to have 1 trillion parameters. That just came out about 5 minutes ago. So once again, NVIDIA with their CUDA library, with their Nematron models, and with their GPUs. They are really trying to make sure they become the full stack. And as a result of that full stack, they proliferate more and more compute throughout the ecosystem. It could also be very bullish for SpaceX. I mean, SpaceX is going to need a lot of money to finance their compute ambitions as well. Now, they have $100 billion on the balance sheet based on the IPO. Semi-Analysis said they're going to do $500 billion in ARR in a couple of years. Elon says he wants to get to $1 trillion by 2030. I mean, if they actually end up doing that and the stock's only $2 trillion in market cap, yeah, the stock's going to go higher. But to do that, you need a lot of money in the system. You potentially need some financing, and you also need Jensen to be ready to sell you these GPUs, which is, I think, why NVIDIA and SpaceX have been so friendly with each other, and why Elon has praised them and Micron and all those other companies in the AI semiconductor ecosystem. So that's what we got. Hopefully this continues to play out, but it was a massive announcement. I did not expect all those people to be together in the same room, but it goes to show how important they believe this opportunity is, and quite frankly, how much they think you need to have this opportunity to grow the U.S. economy, because as of now, the U.S. economy is effectively growing based on this idea of AI and compute. All right, some of the other earnings that we had yesterday, ASTS, that's up 2%. I did not listen to the call, but let me know in the chat for those that listened to the call. It was pretty bullish. I mean, they said everything they needed to say on the call to affirm the broader goal of what ASTS is trying to do for connectivity. They missed on revenue. They missed on EPS. This is effectively a pre-revenue company, so it doesn't matter that much. But the EPS miss was a little aggressive, and I think that's why the street was mad. Cantor raised their price target to $90 from $80, which is why the stock is starting to get a little bit of a move right here in the pre-market. They said, as we crystallize the quarter, we think it's clear that AST's dual source demand algorithm is less of a strategic pivot and more of a nuanced evolution. Essentially, we think ASTS can continue to pull revenue and profitability results left by selling its commercially developed solution in both the US and international markets. We also think the company can develop a functional step change whereby government demand supports AST cost advantages, which supports better B2B and B2C profitability. The broader argument that I got from the earnings is that they have $1 billion in backlog of revenue. Like, the revenue is coming. It's just a question of being able to scale up the satellite launches. And as they continue to do that, you know, this is a company that should be well on its way to be a profitable connectivity play. And SpaceX, you know, I think only increases the broader TAM for ASTS. So I know the stock's been taking a hit ever since dilution. Earnings weren't amazing, but the call itself seemed to make a lot of sense for the broader story on it. Rocket Lab, look, it was a good quarter. They announced a bunch of things, but two things happened. Number one, they came in line with EPS and revenue. They are still not profitable. It looks like it's going to take them, it looks like it's going to be at least another year, if not a half a year, to get profitable. So that catalyst wasn't there. Revenue, they beat by $3 million. That wasn't that exciting. $234 million on a $47 billion market cap, you know, right now is not something the street's going to be super excited about. But the biggest issue is they said the launch pad for Neutron is on track to do in Q4 2026, but the actual launch of Neutron will not happen until 2027, which was obviously another delay from what people thought would happen by the end of the year. So, I mean, it's down 3%, not that big of a deal. Rocket Lab goes up and down 5-7% every day. So I wouldn't read too much into the earnings reaction, but the lack of the Neutron clarity towards the end of the year, I think, is why this stock has been taking a hit after hours. Ghost was huge. Yes, Ghost. They announced a few partnerships yesterday. They always announce a ton of partnerships on earnings, which is starting to become common for them. And they announced the same thing yesterday. The Ghost mission, they announced Rocket Lab Germany. They announced the Neutron deal with Kepler Communications. So everything that they need to do, they're doing. It's just we need Neutron to happen sooner than later to get the market excited. Okay, so that is what we have with some of the earnings that were on yesterday. The humanoid robotics race is becoming more and more exciting. Unitree's IPO, this is the largest Chinese company for robots, is 8,000x oversubscribed. I couldn't believe this seeing it yesterday. Like, I get that there's hype behind humanoid robots. This is going to be the first real play on robots that we're going to be able to understand in a much more meaningful way. And like, you know, it's gonna let us know how Figure, Apptronic, all those companies that want to go public, what their demand's gonna look like. But 8,000x oversubscribed. I don't think that's because Unitree is some amazing robotics company. I mean, from my understanding, it's a relatively strong company. I don't think it's like super revolutionary. I think people feel that this is gonna be the next big wave, like the next big wave. And because they think it's gonna be the next big wave, they obviously want to get ahead of it. And that's why so many people are getting ready to chase robots. I mean, if you think robots are gonna be bigger than GPUs, and GPUs are pretty big, NVIDIA's selling a lot of them, AMD's selling a lot of them, then, you know, you want to get in on the early ground floor. And so that in and of itself might create the hype cycle for these robot companies to go public in a couple of years. And who knows, man, if the robot companies need a lot of memory, need a lot of chips. If robots really start selling to the point where Elon's right and there's billions, there's like 2 robots for every human. I know that's going to take a long time, but if we get anywhere near that goal, like maybe that genuinely 10x is the semiconductor industry. And as a result of that, you just need more compute, more cloud, and you get obviously compute turning into an asset class, which becomes very important. We talked about this already, but the Wall Street Journal reporting that Anthropic is getting ready for a late September, early October IPO. That means in about a month, we will see their numbers. And this is really important because we'll finally have an understanding of how profitable this company is and what their trajectory of growth is looking like. And I think the number is going to be relatively decent, but the question is going to be what the trajectory of the sustainability of those numbers looks like. Also, how profitable are they on a net income basis, not on a gross margin business, but on an actual net income basis, like how much money do they have to keep spending on compute to get there. And as long as, the market's okay with that, Anthropic is going to be a $2 trillion company, if not a $3 trillion company, because their numbers compared to SpaceX are a lot more sustainable to keep the stock afloat. But, when you go public, every little headline affects you. And so that's going to be something the street has to think about as well. Speaking of every number affecting you, this is what Bloomberg came out and said today. S&P earnings are going to set up a tougher 2027. This is something we're actually not talking about enough, and it's really important. EPS growth is on track to go 32% in Q2 after you take away the Anthropic and OpenAI and SpaceX mark-to-markets that a lot of the big tech companies did. Bank of America is warning that growth could slow below 20% by Q1 2027 into mid-teens for the full year. Now, that would still be incredible EPS growth, but there is something to think about. If you're buying, a stock right now in 2026 based on amazing earnings growth, can they replicate that earnings growth in 2027? This has been the entire story with Micron, SanDisk, right? I think the reason those stocks are under $1,000, Micron at least, and SanDisk went under 1,000 is because the market is concerned that in 2027, 2028, like the EPS growth is going to go like this and then just fall off a cliff. It'll still be really good growth, but it'll be so dramatically lower than what it was in the year before that it will lead to a re-rating of the stock, even if you put a decent multiple on it. And that might happen for the entire S&P. Now, if we could keep up 30% growth 2 years in a row, I don't know the last time we did that. If we do, Tom Lee's thesis on 2027 being the greatest year to be a stock market investor that he's been saying might end up happening. If we actually have inflation coming down, labor market being stable, which is something we're trying to get close to right now, and then earnings growth exploding at the level that it's exploding at. And I think Jensen's argument is like, yeah, why wouldn't it? Because AI continues to be profitable, and boom, here's a fresh $500 billion to make sure that earnings growth continues to sustain. A lot of that earnings growth right now is AI capex. It's not like actual productivity. It's there, productivity is up there, but if we didn't have the capex, we would not have the earnings growth. So theoretically, the capex should continue, which should continue the earnings growth, but you need like the capex not only to continue, but for it to accelerate and prove there's an ROI for that earnings growth to be as strong as it is. If not, you're just gonna have tough comps. That's what Robin is dealing with this year as well, right? Like they had to beat $400 or $500 million in revenue last year, so they kept beating it by 50% every single quarter. Now they have to beat $1 billion in revenue, which is tougher, but that's the burden that should be on a company to beat these higher metrics and to continue to sustain that growth. That's why they get that premium, but it's just not easy. And so I think for the broader market, it's not going to be as easy as well next year, unless AI continues to be as strong as it is. This is a take by Josh Brown that I thought was also really good from a couple of days ago. Here is his case for why the bull market makes sense and for why this bull market likely will continue to be as strong as it is.
Legal pad and say, fill the first page, yellow pad, fill the first page with every characteristic you would want for a market rally in order to feel confident to stay long. Like write down all the things. Here's what I would write down, okay? Earnings beats in every sector. I think we have 10 out of 11 companies are on average beating or something like that. So check. Rotations, leadership stocks getting killed and other stocks becoming new leadership. Defensive rallying with cyclical. Growth rallying with value. Large cap rallying with small cap. Revenue growth ahead of expectation, not just games with earnings or buybacks, but like actual sales growth ahead of what's being expected. Analysts raising their expectations for next quarter during this quarter across the entire S&P 500, which is what's going on. International stock support, lots of IPOs, but not too many IPOs. Like every single thing that I would write down on the pad to say healthy market, we have all of it.
One more ingredient, economists getting cautious.
Oh yeah, fuck them. That's part. I love that. Every minute that those people spend analyzing Kevin Warsh's suit and tie is another minute I have to make money in stocks. But literally, you couldn't script it better. Couldn't script it better. And you got Bitcoin falling, right? You got like, you can't say it's a speculative mania because you have stocks that went up 100% and then fell 40%.
How about the DGen Dow is in a 50%?
I think there's some really good nuances to what he's saying right there. No one can call this crazy, crazy, crazy speculative mania because we had it in June and it corrected. Like it corrected horribly. I mean, stocks fell 60 to 70%. They've started to recover, but they're still down 30 to 40% from their all-time high. So you've got stocks that had that speculative mania with massive amounts of leverage. A lot of that leverage has been wiped out of the system from an institutional and from a retail perspective. By the way, Stifel set $132 on Rock Lab, so they continue to be bullish from the earnings that we saw. And then you have Bitcoin, which is one of the most speculative assets in the world that hasn't really done anything all year because we haven't gotten rate cuts. By the way, this entire bull market is happening in 2026, S&P up 13% year to date with no rate cuts. And so you're just seeing the broader market be able to adapt to a earnings cycle that has led to the type of growth that we're seeing, the market putting a multiple on that earnings cycle. You know, we have this Iran situation that continues to last, and still stocks are going higher because at some point capital has to be allocated. And it's undeniable that that capital should be allocated to assets that are growing, and the assets that are growing ultimately are U.S. stocks. But not just U.S. stocks, the Nikkei, Kospi, even those just two companies, you know, across the entire world, your MSCI, you're seeing the entire global markets react to the earnings growth we're getting from AI, and it doesn't look like that's slowing down. So why is Tom Lee calling a 10% drop in the stock market? I am also confused about that. I still don't understand that. I think we can experience a drop. I think, you know, at all-time highs, we're probably going to have some type of 5% pullback, especially as we end up into the end of August. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, we're happy. But I don't think it goes to 10%. But I think he's trying to be more cautious here, saying, you know, things are really good. And, you know, the Bank of America had this chart that came out yesterday showing their bull and bear indicator. And basically every signal they have when it comes to selling is going off right now, which ironically, they said this a couple months ago as well, and it wasn't a good time to sell. But basically their argument is like, you can't get even more bullish than where we are right now. So their indicator since 2002 is saying that this is the most optimistic time you've ever had in history. And that should follow with some type of a crash. You also had that stat we had last week that the S&P 500 had 4 million calls that were bought on it last week, which was a record for the S&P in a week. So you're just seeing, or actually it was in like one day. It was like on Monday, I think, last week, which just means there's a lot of excitement. But that excitement is coming after a horrific drawdown in July that wiped out a ton of leverage. And a lot of stocks still aren't at their all-time highs yet. So I think the biggest thing that Josh said was the diversification of this rally. Healthcare, financials, consumer discretionary, Netflix, Uber, Airbnb, all these companies that were dead all year. Forget software and hyperscalers, but like just basic stocks that you would think have really good earnings growth, like Netflix and Airbnb, you know, they all have their own nitpicky issues that you could look at, but they shouldn't be trading at 52-week lows, and they're not anymore because the market is rotating capital into the names that are compounding earnings, even if they don't sell chips or sell the nuts and bolts that go into a chip. Intel, by the way, their $15 billion offering, they're upping it to $20 billion. It was 18x oversubscribed yesterday. So there is plenty of demand to give Intel the money to build out more foundries to essentially become the TSMC of America. But that stock's still down 4% from yesterday, down 0.5% right now in the pre-market. So look, I try to present both perspectives on the show every day. And, you know, I think there's plenty of bear cases that are out there, but the biggest bear case was a rate hike because of inflation. And inflation rate hikes, or inflation as a result, rate hikes as a result of inflation is starting to come down as oil comes down. And hopefully if this war actually ends, which, you know, every day we're getting a new signal that it should be ending, that's going to immediately take off the rate hike probabilities. And then that labor market data we got on Friday was super bullish because it led to the market realizing that the labor market is not weak, but not explosively hot, which means you don't need to have this massive worry that Kevin Warsh is going to hike rates in September. I mean, at this point, even if oil stays at 82, if they were to hike rates, it would just make them look stupid. Like it would just really, the Fed would really just be like, a lot of people would be like, what is the Fed doing? Like there would be no way, I think, for anyone who votes for a rate hike to meaningfully justify it when you're seeing the structural levels of inflation come down. By the way, speaking of inflation, if you look at the inflation forecasters going into tomorrow, most of them see CPI normalizing at 3.4 and actually only up 0.2% quarter over quarter, which is actually way better than what I think the expectations were back in April. So it's not going to be 2%. I know the Fed wants to get to 2%, but the fact that it's at 3.4 and not like, 4.7 is something that's at least productive for stocks, and productive for the potential of not getting a hike, even if we don't get a cut. I do have the UPS outfit on today. That is true. That is true. Your boy hopefully can deliver a green market today, and we can keep this going. So, I mean, look, the start of August has not been that bad. We got a lot of earnings that we got to get into to make sure that the earnings continue showing that the market's going to be okay. But I mean, overall, like the fact that software is back, hyperscalers are back, financials are back, healthcare is back. The semiconductor names aren't going crazy parabolic every day, which is good because they're already up so much for year to date. I mean, if you look at the year to date winners on the S&P 500, by the way, even we complain so much about these stocks. By the way, VG, they missed on revenue slightly, 4.5 versus 4.6. They beat on EPS, 51 cents versus 48 cents. That stock's relatively flat. Obviously, their earnings or their stock price is more so reflected through the price of oil, but their earnings were not bad at all. Sea Limited had a great earnings. They grew every segment 48%. It continues to prove that Southeast Asia is a monster for growth. Overall GDP is up 7%. That stock's up 10%. So Sea Limited, incredible earnings, and it makes sense why that stock continues to go up. But these are the leaders year to date, even after all the drawdowns. The Nasdaq's up 17%, SanDisk 428%, Micron 208%, Seagate 195, Intel 165, Western Digital 158, Marvell, ARM, Lumentum, Nebius is in the top 10 performing stocks in the Nasdaq this year, 124, AMD 123. I mean, like, all of these are down about 30% from the highs, but there's just up so much. And I think that normalization of taking away 30% from them and giving it to Microsoft and Amazon and all the software companies that are putting up really good numbers is probably healthy. And for the more balanced portfolios that were out there, you're starting to get a lot more momentum. Riot is up because they got a $10 billion deal with Anthropic. So congrats to Riot. I know a lot of people are questioning why the other neoclouds have not gotten a deal with Anthropic, because that Anthropic headline would explode any neocloud. But Riot ended up getting it, $10 billion over 20 years. I think it's like $9.8 billion, and that's why that stock is up. VG is not flat. Is it flat, VG? Whoa, okay. When I saw it 30 minutes ago, it was down 0.5%. Now it's down 8%. Well, that might be... I mean, oil's actually up right now. Yeah, so that's something. All right, so we have to look in their guide. I did not look that deep in their numbers, but they missed on revenue by 1%, beat on EPS by 2%. Something their guide probably is pissing off the street. But that stock right there, down 8%. All right, folks, 30 seconds. Thank you all for being here. That NVIDIA announcement was a big, big one yesterday. Let's see how the street ultimately reacts to it. We got a bunch of stocks from yesterday, like Epsilon, that are holding on to their gains. Palantir, obviously, over the past week, holding on to 40%. Zeta getting up 3% yesterday. ASTS and rklb, let's see if those can go green. SpaceX having a massive recovery from the lows at 100. The memory names trying to get back. I think today will be the first day that the market digests if that $500 billion makes sense for the broader semi complex. And if it does, maybe we see some momentum in those names. All right, 9:30 Tuesday, August 11th. Thank you, everybody, for being here. The stock market is now open. All right, wake your asses up. Let's get into it. On this morning, August 11th, NVIDIA opens 221.39. It's up 2, which is green and good. But let's see if we can actually get above 223. It's down from where it was in the pre-market, but still relatively green here on the day. Rocket Lab down 4%. SpaceX, wow. Talk about a divergence here between SpaceX and Rocket Lab. SpaceX getting ready to go for 140. Palantir flipped green immediately, 172 to 176. That is green. CoreWeave, that's up 5%. CoreWeave and Nebius should be up today, man. That NeoCloud announcement was bullish. Nebius up 4%. I mean, I don't know if this is the opening bell pump and then they eventually dump, but that $500 billion, a lot of it will be going to the NeoClouds that ends up getting ready to buy more NVIDIA chips. So I would imagine the market would be somewhat excited for that. Micron, that's up 1.2%. That's green. SK Hynix, that's up 3%. That continues to go green. S&P 500 opens up green. NVIDIA gets a red candle, still green on the day, but a red candle from the market open. Rocket Lab looking like it wants to get a recovery back up to 80. Got stuck at 74 last night. Actually touched 71.83. Now it's 78.50. Accelera, massive print they had yesterday. They did touch $10 for a little bit before coming down. I think there's a lot of new volume that's getting into this name. Now that volume has to be sustained because, with biotechs, a lot of the market will chase them on positive results. There was another company yesterday, 10X, that lost 81% of its value because their results did not end up working out. So they're up 8% today, but they went from $13 to $1.50 yesterday. So the people that now discover Accelera, the question is just, are they there for a long term or are they there for a trade? And hopefully you get new volume coming into the name as that continues to go up. Elf, that's flat. Palo Alto, that's down 2%. Palo Alto and CrowdStrike went up a lot yesterday, so I would imagine they take a little bit of a breather. Robinhood just got dumped 93.95 as that continues to go down. CrowdStrike right there, that's down 1%. Again, that dump on the cybersecurity names makes sense. They went up a lot yesterday, so it seems like they're giving back some of those gains. SoFi, that's flat. Micron, this one's been kind of stuck in a range. Micron's kind of been trading like NVIDIA, if people have noticed. I mean, it's, large cap name, $1 trillion company that's now just kind of stuck between 10, 15 bucks a day. You haven't had that massive breakout up or that massive breakout down in about a week. Meta, that's flat at 593. TTD, is that going up? TTD is up 1%. It's still down 30 from last week. Coursera, that's down 3%. Broadcom, that is flat. A lot of names are flat. AAOI, the photonics rug pull yesterday was generational. I mean, all of them pumped in the pre-market 10, 15%. Then they dumped. Then they pumped like at 10 a.m. Then they dumped throughout the day. So I don't know. I feel like the market wants to bet on the optics names, but they just weren't willing to give them the type of love that they deserve. There definitely wasn't a rotation from memory to photonics yesterday, as some people thought. That didn't exactly play out. Palantir now going red, basically flat. CoreWeave also losing it. It was up another 5. HIMS was down 6. Now it's only down 1, which is good. Microsoft got to 510 yesterday. Now trying to hold above 500. Coherent, that one got rug pulled pretty badly yesterday as well. Robinhood continues to fall. Intel, that's down 0.5% after getting oversubscribed. Fermi got another data center deal yesterday for 290 megawatts. That's why that stock is up 20%. Rocket Lab, did we hit 80? We are trying 79.44 as it's going for it. AMD is down. I wouldn't be surprised if the market takes down the NVIDIA competitors because, look, I don't know if Lisa Su can get $500 billion from the biggest banks in the world to put into companies to buy her products. But maybe it's possible. Now, she did give up 20% of the company to Sam Altman and Zuckerberg to get them to buy chips. But that type of leverage is something that really only Jensen has. NVIDIA right there trying to break above 220. Nebius at 194. So, maybe the market interprets it as negative for AMD and Broadcom that, they're not going to have that type of fresh capital going into the system, even though they should benefit from that $500 billion regardless. NVIDIA 220.75 as that continues to struggle at that 220 level. Bloom, that's up on the day, 4%. On, their earnings were not good. I didn't go through all of them, but I saw the headline numbers, down 21%. And that's why that stock took a hit. What was the NVIDIA news? NVIDIA is working with 6 of the biggest financial institutions in America to allocate $500 billion of their capital into AI labs, neo clouds, etc., to ultimately buy NVIDIA chips. That is the deal. NVIDIA obviously will benefit from that. I think the market's hesitation to give all the semis a massive candle today is the market not really sure if they can trust that $500 billion will be properly allocated. And that's, ultimately comes down to Jensen continuing to prove it. Archer, their earnings were relatively flat, nothing too crazy. That was up 4%. IREN, that is up 3%. AAOI flips somewhat green. This one has been back and forth pretty much every single day. CPI tomorrow, I don't think is going to be that bad unless there's a miss that we're not expecting. Figma's down 2% as well. But the problem is if CPI is good, but the broader market still feels that oil has a room to go up because this war is not over, then the pressure on CPI is not going to be the perception of it. It's going to be the future trajectory of oil and energy that gets factored into CPI, along with memory inflation. Memory inflation is still a thing. Like, consumers are going to have to pay more for consumer electronics because of the shortage of memory. And so that's another thing that Kevin Warsh talked about a while ago that needs to be combated by something. And maybe energy is the way to combat that. Nebi is losing a little bit of it, but still holding on to that 4%. Are the semis red today officially? Semis are it's a mixed bag. Qualcomm, TSM, Marvell, ARM, Lam Research are up. Micron's up. Nebius is up. Intel's down. AMD's down. What about SMH? HIM's actually flipped green. That's up 3%. SMH is up about 1%. So that one still is somewhat green. AppLovin got downgraded today by Bank of America to 300. I don't know why they hate this company. I haven't done enough research into it. Their growth looks incredible to me, but people hate this stock. And this was an $800 stock. And at that time, 800 kind of looked cheap based on the growth they were putting. The growth hasn't really changed, but the market sentiment around their role in advertising, Robinhood loses 93 right here, has somewhat changed. And that's why that has taken a pretty big hit. Oracle down 2. Okay. Oracle officially goes down as we open up the day again. Wall Street Journal reporting that Anthropic's going to get ready to IPO in October. Those numbers, that you talk about how October ends up getting messy like it was last year. That Anthropic S1, I hope they have every freaking smart person at the company look over those numbers before they present them to the public and make a compelling case for why the numbers make sense. Because we just can't get a bad S1. The market can't interpret those numbers as unsustainable or not real. And, the market's going to be looking for a concentration of clients, where the CapEx is going, the runway on CapEx, how much they expect to raise. Or there's so many things the market's going to want. I think the IPO overall will go okay because it doesn't feel like the growth is slowing down anytime soon. They're probably going to maybe not grow 10x next year, but if they at least grow 3 to 4x, I think the market's going to be pretty happy. That would put them at effectively 300, 400 billion of ARR, which would, you put a $2-3 trillion market cap on that, it doesn't look that crazy. But the question is when that growth stops, or if that growth is challenged by open source models and all that stuff, that's something that the market has to think about. Now, again, they could have a SpaceX type of IPO where the IPO is successful and then a week later it falls 50% and struggles to even stay above the IPO price now at 135. It's just their numbers might be a bit better than SpaceX. Fermi, again, they got a deal yesterday. That's why that Fermi fell. Fermi is up 17% today. This was a data center IPO from last year, but it's down 80% all time, So to me, this is not that exciting for it to be up 17% off of a data center deal that they should have gotten a year ago when they went public, given the stock is not returning anything for shareholders. If NVIDIA were to get Fermi $10 billion to buy their GPUs, that's where I think the market would be like, okay, this company is essentially not a public company that is executing at the level they should be executing at. The share price is one reflection of that. I mean, down 80% in a year after IPO, you're going to have a lot of people say, who the hell is running this company? If NVIDIA were to give them the money because they just need to book more sales, that's where I think the market would be like, okay, is NVIDIA just using Goldman's piggy bank and throwing it around at stupid companies that really don't have any business having access to that type of capital? And, that could be part of the reason for why the deal is perceived as a bit more bearish. NVIDIA right there, 219.50. You would hope that Jensen, puts the capital in a much better ecosystem. SPY just went red. Okay, there you go, 772.97. Again, the main headline this morning was the foreign minister told CBS, we think the U.S. and Iran are very close to a deal that should be announced soon. I know it sounds like something we've said over and over again, but still, that at least is somewhat encouraging. Micron flips red. Dude, every day, every freaking day, 880 down to 863. It's like clockwork. Either if it is Nebius going red now, Nebius is actually holding on. But every day we've seen these names just flip immediately at the bell. Lumentum, they also have earnings today. That's going to be important, 810. That one's also red. ASML, which went down yesterday for I don't know what reason. That stock's up 4%, so I think that's recovering a lot of what it lost yesterday. You're seeing more of that momentum. BTC, Bitcoin is going down. Hit 63 last night, now barely above 64. Melly and C Limited are two of the international stocks that are just massively, massively showing that they can grow. I think that's why both those stocks are up right there. C Limited up 12%, Mercado Libre up 3%. The international names haven't done that well this year, but it doesn't look like the sector itself is dead in terms of earnings as they continue to grow. Shopify goes red, down about 1%. Rubrik down about 1%. Again, a lot of these names, Fastly, they had a 20% day yesterday. They're down 1.4%. So some of the software names just giving some of it back. Upwork is down 12 after being down 20 yesterday. Their earnings were not the best. And I think a lot more people are concerned about Fiverr, Upwork in a world of AI. Is Google actually down? Wow, Google goes down. Interesting. Okay, Google's down. NVIDIA's struggling to hold on. Hood goes red. Tencent is down 11. Where's Baba? Baba's down 3. Cloudflare is down 4. Okay, what's green? Palantir's green. Tesla's green by $1. NVIDIA's green by a couple bucks. Nebius is like green, but it keeps waffling back and forth. Marvell is barely green. CoreWeave losing most of their pump. You know what I also think is happening, guys? I think a lot of people are on vacation. The volume on SPY has been abysmal for the past 2 weeks. I mean, like, the average volume on SPY is around 80 million shares, 70 million shares. It's coming in at like 30, 40 million every day. So it's roughly 50% of it. I think that's also happening as the month of August progresses. And that's why some of this price action is a bit weird. Intel still don't have a percent. Yeah, school is starting as well for a bunch of people. So you just might have folks that are not in the household day. QXO is up 2. That's green. Anya says, I'm on vacation. That's also true. You are on vacation, but you're probably still looking at your portfolio. So there are definitely people on vacation that are still trading, but for like the professional, money managers that are on vacation, they might just not be looking at their portfolios at all. And honestly, their capital moves a lot of this stuff more than us. Netflix up a little bit. CPI jitters. CPI is not going to be bad. Market reaction, I don't know what to say, but CPI itself is not going to be bad. I mean, it's not like oil went crazy in July. Like, it got up to like 85, 87, but then it calmed down. So I don't think CPI is going to be the worst thing in the world. SK Hynix, that's somewhat green. Nokia's a little green. Copen had a great earnings. That is fair. That stock right there up 22%. This is a small cap, under $1 billion market cap. Massive earnings on that one. As that continued to get some more momentum. Gold, is that up again today? This will be the 4th day in a row that gold is up. Yep, it's up another 1%. So you're seeing gold and silver get a little bit more love. The top 5 stocks that people who use Schwab bought yesterday, or bought in the month of July. This was put out yesterday. SpaceX, Micron, Intel, Oracle, and Tesla. SpaceX, Micron, Intel, Oracle, Tesla were the top 5 stocks in the month of July for Schwab clients that were bought. Top stocks that were sold: Apple, Broadcom, Adobe, PayPal, AMD. Apple, Broadcom, Adobe, PayPal, AMD. This was all for the month of July for Schwab clients. By the way, let's look at the Robinhood Investor Index for August. Let's see the top 10 stocks that are on the platform in August. I actually haven't checked this yet. Nebius now up 3%. It was up 6%. Wow, SpaceX is it. Okay. Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Tesla, NVIDIA, AMD, Ford, Palantir, and SpaceX. So Palantir and SpaceX. Palantir's been there for a while. It got kicked out a month ago. Netflix got in there. Netflix is now out. AMD was the newest entrant a month ago as well. Ford has been there for a while because they gave a lot of free Ford shares to people who signed up. Now SpaceX makes it. There's like 800,000 people that have access to SpaceX on Robinhood. So that's probably going to be a top 10 stock for a long time. Then you have Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and NVIDIA. Meta, I think, used to be in there. Meta is now out, which means probably some people just gave up on Meta on Hood. Google down 2. Interesting, dude. Kind of weird price action. Micron loses 860, officially goes red. SpaceX red. Is Rocket Lab still holding 79? Rocket Lab 75. Rocket Lab just completely gave out right there. Duolingo, that's down 2. Joby, that's down 0.5. 10 a.m. we will get existing home sales. We'll see how that affects QXO and Open Door. HIMS goes from up 6 to down 4. Honestly, I think the low volume could be a culprit here today. Like, this is very weird price act. There's no trend anywhere. There's no sector that's showing a trend. AAOI goes up and down by $7 every 5 minutes. NVIDIA, there's not even a lot of volume on NVIDIA. Like, NVIDIA should have 20, 25 million shares traded by now. It's at 14, 220 right there. As that's up 1%. Did Nebius just lose 190? Oh my goodness. There you go, 187 from 195. Coherent continues to go down. Epsilor got a couple upgrades today. $30 from Truist and $15 from BMO. Is Epsilor holding on to it? Epsilor, you can't be too upset. Above $9, even if it's flat. It's better than not that it's holding that level. Yeah, I mean, this is this is just kind of nothing that crazy happening right there. Cloudflare, that's down 3. The TA charts are completely going sideways. Jason will be on today. I'll be curious to get his technical thoughts on a lot of this, but you got to find things that have either earnings catalysts or some other external pieces of news to get any level of volume to even have a trade. Mag 7 is all red except NVIDIA and Tesla. Cypher is up with Riot. Cypher's up 8. Boeing, which took a stake in Archer, that is green. Yeah, you're just not getting that much, guys, as we get into it here today. Kind of the dog days of August. There's obviously a lot of things to analyze over the past 24 hours that we've had. Uber goes below 80, but I mean, prices are relatively bored. Microsoft, hopefully we don't lose 500 there. It would be nice to hold above 500. Palantir at 175. Amcor actually is selling off their China business for $1.5 billion. That's why that stock's up too. They're exploring a stake sale in its China business, which could be valued at $1.5 billion. The company may retain a minority stake with Asian investment firms and industry players seen as potential buyers. So again, Amcor was at 95 in June. Does it get back to 95? I don't know. They're going to need a lot of excitement to get that thing to pump to that level. But at least it's not in the low 40s like it was at a week ago. What about SanDisk? Are we holding 1200? We should be 1250. Yeah, but this one's also basically flat. Yeah, you're not like, Rocket Lab's down the most is what I'm seeing. That down 5% is like the ugliest out of a lot of these names. Cypher and Riot up the most. You got CoreWeave after the bell. We'll see what happens with them, but I don't know about CoreWeave, dude. I think they're going to have really good numbers, but I feel like the street's going to be upset for some reason. They need to have such phenomenal numbers that the street can't say anything. Because if CoreWeave dumps, it begs the question of what happens to Nebius tomorrow morning. So we really got to see what these numbers look like for the market to be a bit more excited. AppLovin falling off a cliff right there as that continues to go down. Even Reddit. The thing is, these names aren't down like 4 to 5%. They're not up 4 to 5%. They're just like flat to up or down 0.3%. So there's a lot of them that are just not getting any momentum. C Limited, again, great earnings. That's up 11%. Google, not sure why that's down 2 right there. A lot of the bad news for Google was last week with the leadership changes and Gemini 4 not being that exciting. But other than that, not sure. Plug was up 15. Now it's down 5 or up 5. And then MU is flat. VG did miss earnings, unfortunately. VG, but you're getting a little recovery. It was down 8, now it's down 4. The shoe company On is down 20%. Okay, how bad were these earnings for them to go down 20%? They missed revenue. They beat on EPS by a penny. Gross margins are up 3%. Their guide wasn't even a miss. I'm not sure what the street is that upset about. Adjusted EBITDA was a miss by $3 million. They had to say something in the call that probably got the street upset. But on right there, down 21%. Where's Nike? Nike is down about 2% right there. I mean, it's hard to imagine anything exciting markets will do until NVIDIA earnings. Do you think what we saw in November again and we start to roll over between now and month end? Yeah, look, NVIDIA is going to be important because to your point, you know, CPI is tomorrow. Maybe the market's a little jittery before that. And then obviously NVIDIA is going to be really big at the end of August. And, you know, that'll determine a lot of market action. Usually NVIDIA pumps into the print and then dumps the day after. So it kind of makes sense if we see NVIDIA rally up back to like the 230s going into earnings. But I feel like for that to happen, the market's got to be pushing 8,000 again. Or at least get close to that. It's like 7,800, 7,900. If we don't see that, then it is up to the whims of Trump at this point on if he's going to end this war. Because if we go into September, October, November with midterms and a war still going, which now, dude, unless we get a deal anytime soon, it does feel like this thing is going to continue into the midterms. And it's hard to believe because this started in March. But if they do get a deal by then, or at least a ceasefire by then, maybe the markets can price that in and not be as worried into the midterms. And then you have the Anthropic IPO. So, you know, you could definitely make a bear case for how the end of the year plays out in a negative way. I mean, I don't think anyone thought last year the end of the year would be bearish. I mean, we were, if you look at your like portfolio Oracle getting dumped right now, if you look at your portfolio like performance, I remember last year, October 9th is where everything topped. I think like maybe June 20th is where a lot of things topped this year, around that time frame. But on October 9th, I think everyone felt on top of the world and they were like, man, everything's great. And then the crypto glitch, the soybean thing, and then it just starts cascading a fall. And then we ended, you know, December at 680. We were supposed to end at 7,000. Like it ended up becoming an okay year for the S&P, but just like not that explosive year you had in 24. I think the risk is that could happen again because we're up so much going into July. And so for us to keep this momentum and expand it, you need new catalysts, new earnings growth, new things that the market has to be excited about. Doesn't mean we have to go bearish by end of year, but it might not mean we need to have a 20% S&P year again, because to get that, we're still another 8% away. I think the ingredients are there to get it though. And, you know, the war coming to an end would be, you know, the best way to potentially get there. Yeah, so I'll be live for CPI tomorrow. We'll be live 10 minutes early. And we will get into CPI. My on clouds are the best shoes I've ever bought. Dude, I'm so bad when it comes to knowing anything about shoes. Like, I wear the same thing. Like, dude, these slippers, they're amazing. My mom gets mad that I haven't bought new ones, but look at these. These are incredible. Look at these. Look at that. Every day, bro. That's all you need. It's all you need. You don't need any Nike Jordans, on Hokas. All you need is some slippers with socks, by the way. I don't know who wears slippers without socks, but always with socks. Bloom Energy 211. That goes flat. Not seeing much right there. Palantir kind of flat as well. I don't even know what the W is on there, dude. I don't even. Does anyone know what logo that is? That purple W? I have no idea. I just ordered slippers a year ago, and I like the color. U of W? Is that a football team? I genuinely have no clue. Google, why is she actually going down today? Is Amazon down 2%? Amazon's down 2 as well. SpaceX just fell below 135. Reddit just got a rally back up to 160. Google officially loses 350. Microsoft's trying to hold above 500. It's like the market's not happy with that NVIDIA deal because you would think the hyperscalers would get a bit of a pump too on that NVIDIA announcement. And they're just not either. Maybe the market thinks oil is going higher. I mean, oil just fell by 1%. That's also part of the reason probably VG's down. if the market is going to price in oil's going up, then stocks are expensive right now. It's just that simple. Like you can't buy anything. If oil's actually heading to 90, 95, you can't buy any stocks right now. Like outside of VG, like they're gonna take a correction if we rally. Oh, by the way, Trump said yesterday dude, this is how you know the Iran situation is getting boring. Like he tweeted some large paragraph about Iran, and like I don't even think this was covered by a lot of people. I didn't see this until this morning, and usually I catch everything. And it's like I didn't even care because at this point it's just getting old. But he said, I see that representatives of the Islamic Republic of Iran are asking for compensation for the damage done to them during the 5-month military conflict started because they will not have a nuclear weapon, even though it was never mentioned in any of the negotiations or meetings. But it is an interesting idea because now I am likewise demanding compensation from Iran for all the people that they have killed and gravely wounded with their roadside bombs in many conflicts. Additionally, compensation should be paid to the families of the hundreds of thousands of innocent protesters that Iran has killed over the last 50 years. I have instructed my representatives to put this firmly into any and all future negotiations. Like you hear this shit and it's like, so if the US actually brings up like a new negotiating talking point about, hey, like you guys want compensation, but now we want compensation. I feel like the Iranians are just gonna be like, okay, so what? Like, you think we're actually going to give you compensation? Like, they're not going to give compensation. So it just feels like Trump is saying that to say that. He knows Iran is not actually going to pay back for any of the casualties they've caused. And I don't think the U.S. wants to pay reparations. Now, the U.S. is going to have to give up something, whether it's sanctions relief or, like. So a lot of this is just back and forth that isn't really rooted in anything real. And I feel like it's delaying the inevitable ceasefire, which has to happen, and both sides know it has to happen. But if the market's interpreting this as like a stalemate forever, then we're just not going to see much momentum. Yeah, Trump has said this all the time. Trump says Iran agrees privately, refuses publicly. I mean, he's been saying that for the past couple of weeks. Look, if they're going to refuse publicly, then you have to capitulate enough to get them to agree publicly. And that means you got to negotiate better. And right now, the market may be doubting how they do that. Oracle right there down 4%. As that still goes down. Okay. Russell, you said Meta's pumping. I have not looked at Meta. If it is up 0.03%, that will not qualify as a pump. Okay. 1.3% is probably a pump compared to all the other times you guys have said Meta is pumping. Why is Meta getting a green candle? Let's see. Oh, Trump did he tweet again? Trump just tweet again? No, but he's doing an interview right now. Trump said the war was necessary to prevent Iran from possessing a nuclear weapon. Oil prices are lower than they were during the Biden administration. I think he's on Air Force One right now. The Iranian economy is in a state of chaos. The Iranians are playing tricks on us. The Iranians are extremely cunning negotiators because they agree to something, but then they tell the press they didn't agree to it. If we hadn't struck Iran, they would have got a nuclear weapon. Okay, I don't know if that's going to necessarily change the market's perspective on all this stuff, but those are the Trump quotes. Meta, I don't see any headline here, but it's weird that Meta's up and Google's down. I don't see any. Again, they had the Muse Glimmer model come out yesterday. Street didn't react to that too well. Yeah, I don't see any headlines here. This might be a bit more technical. I see some bullish option flow coming in from Meta. Maybe that could be part of the reason, but outside of that, Hertz is up 8% on the day. They had a good earnings last week. Stock is still pretty flat from a few months ago, if not down. Tesla, 334. Okay, existing home sales. Let's see if the market cares about that. We're looking at 4.06 million. That is down month over month. Street wanted 4.09. So we're at 4.06, but it is better than the actual expectation of 4.05. And that's what you're seeing right there. Is Trump live right now? I think he is. Hold on. Let me see. This might be from yesterday, but oh yeah, this might be from yesterday. But this is what he said about the U.S. getting something from Iran.
Money for the damage that we've done. I said, that's a good idea. Well, we're going to ask for money for the damage they've done over a 50-year period. If there's damages to be paid, I think Iran should pay those damages.
I want to get the latest now from Bloomberg Washington. Corey.
From July of last year. Now, this count is based on closing, so it's contracts likely signed in May and June when mortgage rates didn't really move all that much, hovering in that higher range around 6.6% on the 30-year fixed. As for inventory, there were 1.54 million homes for sale at the end of July. That's down a little less than 1% year over year, now at a 4.6-month supply. Tight supply continuing to pressure prices. The median price of a home sold in July was $434,100, an increase of 2% year over year. Now, 26% of transactions were all cash, down from 31% the year before. 14% were investors, down from 20% a year ago. And speaking of investors, just a programming note, we're here at the headquarters of Invitation Homes, the nation's largest single.
Okay, so home sales, not something the market cares about that deeply. At least we're seeing in some of the price action, although S&P getting some green candles. Again, Meta, something's being said here. This is almost 2% on Meta in the face of all the Mag 7 going red, and Meta is the only green Mag 7 out of the big four. Google getting a little bit of a candle, but still down 2%. So it feels like someone knows something about Mr. Meta. Micron just flipped green as well. QXO green, Open Door flat. So good home sale numbers, not amazing, but also not anything that I think the market's super excited about. AOI still down about 3%. Bloom basically flat. Bloom was at 220 pre-market. Now it's at 212. Grabs up 2%. I think that's getting some love from C Limited's earnings. Iren, that's up 4. Iren just got back above 40. Why is Uber $80? Uber has had a little bit of sentiment shift over the past couple of days with their acquisition of Delivery Hero and some of the new earnings that have come out. They fell to like 65 when the Waymo partnership was canceled. But Pelosi's in this. The analysts are still pretty bullish, and Uber's pretty much done nothing for the majority of the year. So if it were to break out, it wouldn't be that crazy. Reddit's moving up with Meta. Maybe it's an advertising thing. AppLovin's not getting any of it. Google's not getting any of it, but maybe it is Meta and Reddit together. There's some pretty nice candles on Meta. It feels like a news candle. Like it just came out of nowhere. And I don't see the news. Hertz announces class action lawsuit against Hertz Holdings. Oh, there's a legal firm that announced a class action lawsuit and announces opportunities for investors to lead. Wait, so Hertz is up because they're getting sued? Okay. Class action lawsuit for Hertz. It's always funny when the stock goes down and a bunch of investors come together and be like, we're just going to sue the company. It's like, bro, sometimes you just picked a shitty stock. Like there's not much the company can do about it. Is Bill Ackman joining in that? Is he going to sue Hertz as well? 241. They tried to do that for Palantir when it was like $13 3 years ago. I remember covering it. I was like, class action. I got like an email. It's like, hey, do you own Palantir? You can sue them. And I was like, why would I sue them? It's like the stock's down 50%. I was like, that's my dumbass fault for being down 50%. It's not their fault. Ended up being a blessing in disguise, but like, yeah, you see a lot of that happen over and over again. Amazon, that's down 1%. Palantir up half. Upwork down 10. Accelera still moving. That's how you know things are really bad, right? Like when you're in a stock and you're legit thinking of suing management. That's when you know like it's just bad. That's what happened to Microsoft earlier in the year. Remember there was that firm out of Wisconsin. There was a pension fund that wanted to sue Microsoft because the stock was down 25% year to date. I don't know if they want to sue them anymore, but VG got sued after it went down 50% from IPO. Was that just on the price though, or was that like a misexplanation of their S1 for the arbitration case? I didn't pay too much attention into it, but I feel like investors were claiming something a bit different than just the stock going down. Although VG's IPO, dude, their valuation when they went public was kind of crazy. I mean, it was like, I can't believe they convinced people to buy this thing. They went public at $25, which was, basically putting them at like a $70 billion market cap. And I mean, I don't know their numbers that well, but I don't think they had any business being. That's the hard part about picking up big valuation when you go public. It's like, if you just can't live up to the expectations, like SpaceX, the stock's gonna go down. App Lovin', are we going below 300? 322, below 300. Oh, we did in pre-market, 298. It actually touched it. Below 300 actually would be very interesting if we get there. What is your opinion on Rocket Lab Leaps? I am not a fan of them because Rocket Lab conventionally is expensive. It's $50 billion market cap, doing 800 million in revenue and not profitable. So it's not even about using their expensiveness as a reason to not buy the leaps. It's because they're expensive. If anything goes wrong, forget with Neutron or Rocket Lab the company, but with the macro, you can't have options on a stock that's not undervalued unless everything goes perfect, right? Like the time to buy those long, like Meta leaps actually look a lot more interesting to me because I think Meta is really undervalued. I think Rocket Lab probably could be worth more than $78 a share, but is it undervalued? When you look at the numbers, it's really tough, which means if the high multiple, like Palantir leaps right here are tough. Palantir leaps at 120, a different question. But now Palantir's priced in a lot of their growth. So if anything happens and the stock takes a hit, those leaps lose all their intrinsic value, and you end up losing money on them. So yeah, I think leaps on a lot of these names. I mean, put in the chat, what is a stock that's actually undervalued right now? Because a lot has run. Like a lot has run. And I keep coming back to Meta as like one of those names that's like actually not done anything all year and probably more undervalued than not. It's down 7% year to date compared to all the other Max 7s. Intel's not undervalued, bro. Come on. Intel could definitely go higher than $98, but like it's trading at 120 times earnings. The market is definitely valuing. And I think Grab is absolutely undervalued. And I think those C-limited earnings once again show that operating leverage is going to show up. And when it does, the market's not going to be able to ignore that. Reddit's not undervalued. Reddit's at 140, 130. I thought it was deeply undervalued. Now it's like, not saying approaching fair value, but it's definitely not like the cheapest name that's out there. And I think if it gets that's that 180, 190 range, it's definitely where it should be. I see a lot of Metas. I mean, Adobe's undervalued, but it's Adobe. AEHR, I don't know if it's undervalued. The stock's up a lot this year. And I'm not saying the stock price being up is enough of a reason to say it's not undervalued, but the market is, it trades at 107 times earnings. There's all these different metrics we can use to discuss undervaluation, but some of them are just like objectively, okay, they're, the market is giving them a premium. It's not like the market's giving them 10 times earnings. Yeah, look, Micron is undervalued if you think the PE needs to get closer to 15, 20 times, which honestly, I agree. It probably does need to. Look, here's the thing about Micron and memory. Once again, if Jensen is as serious as he is to this $500 billion deal, everyone's just pumping their bags with tickers in the chat. That's exactly what's happening. Me doing the same with Meta as well. But look, if Jensen is right about this $500 billion thing, how is Micron not going up from here? Unless there's massive supply coming online, which means it doesn't matter that there's 500 billion being pumped into the system because the prices are going to peak and then Micron's earnings are effectively going to peak. And people say, well, they'll buy back their stock. I just don't know how comfortable people are betting on a semiconductor name that is historically cyclical to buy back their stock as the basis to refute historic cyclicality. Like, I think people want to see actual earnings growth, not just buybacks as the basis for earnings growth. And Apple did that, and yeah, the stock went up, but Apple didn't explode. It wasn't like the returns that Micron investors are used to, because once you start buying back your stock, especially at that level, they're talking about 30, 40, 50 billion of buybacks. Like you've said to the market, all right, we don't know what to do with this cash. And those growth rates slow down. So I just don't know if buybacks are the biggest thing that changes it. But yeah, look, if that 500 billion is coming into the ecosystem, like theoretically Micron should be minimum in that $1,000 range. SanDisk just get back into that $1,500 range. Like it's hard to believe there's not a lot of fresh capital that would be chasing these names to get more value. Celsius, this one with that Rockstar Energy stake, got a little bit of a pump, has tried to hold on to it, but hasn't made that big a move. I don't think Nebius is like undervalued. I mean, not only is the stock up a lot, but the premium that Nebius trades at compared to other neo clouds is still pretty massive. It trades at 224 times earnings. And, you know, they're growing a lot, but a lot of that is ARR growth, not necessarily EPS growth. Having said that, Nebius deserves a premium for the best execution in the neo cloud space that we've seen. It's just, you know, does this need to go to 300 to be fair value or something? Or I think 220, 230 is probably a lot more reasonable. So from that perspective, sure. But, you know, it's not like it was when it was 70, 80 bucks back in March. TSM is undervalued. Well, TSM, I think you can make the case for undervaluation, but this is just also a large cap. It's up 32% this year. Same thing with NVIDIA. As much as I think NVIDIA is undervalued at $5 trillion, I'm like, there's a lot of value in that market cap that the market's not going to be the most excited about. Yeah, look, Palantir also has a high PE. I'm not saying they don't have a high PE. I'm not saying Palantir is the easiest buy right here at 120, 130. It was a lot easier than buying it at 176 because it's up 40% in a week. You know, the market's reflected a lot of that value. Now, could I see it breaking above 200 this year? Yeah. Could I see Nebius getting back into that 230, 240 range? Yeah. But the risk reward on Palantir now is not as aggressive as it was a week ago. Same thing when, you know, Nebius was at 140 a week ago. Although the NeoCloud thesis just got a big boost for that NVIDIA $500 billion, you know, investment. Why is Circle pumping? That's a good question. Is it pumping? Circle is up 9. That is actually getting a pump. They didn't have earnings today, right? Bitcoin's not making a move. Circle, Clarity Act is expected September 7th. Circle had earnings on August 5th. The results, we already went over them last week. I'm not sure why it's getting a pump right there, but it's getting a move. GE Vernova, that's up 4%. That might be pumping on the energy announcement in general from NVIDIA with all the money that will be going into data centers and land, et cetera. Celestica did an offering last week. And that offering got them hit as well. Where's DRAM? DRAM's at 50. So the lowest DRAM got this year was 42. The highest it got this year was 80. So you're talking about a pretty significant discount from the absolute highs. Obviously, for it to get to 80 again, you would need Micron to break into that 1200 range. SanDisk. Look, Micron to 1200 seems way easier than SanDisk getting up to 2300. And so, I don't know, it just seems like Micron can have a shot to get back into the $1,000 range, but I feel like you need sentiment to shift. Unfortunately, a lot of people were asking what happened at that Micron conference yesterday. They said everything that they were supposed to say, but it was not something new for the market to take into account. Even though they announced that they have even more long-term agreements. Like these LTAs, I feel like the market's trying to make sense of it. And they're not bearish, but it's just not moving the needle. So I think on earnings, Sanjay is just going to have to really, once again, tell the market the cycle's not slowing down, which is what the SanDisk CEO tried to do. Just didn't fully flip. Please talk about Oracle. Oracle, again, was at 114. So the fact that it's at almost 150, it has made a pretty big move in the past 2.5 weeks. I mean, Oracle should theoretically be up because NVIDIA's $500 billion, a lot of that will go into the ecosystem. You might get Stargate actually financed in a meaningful way. Look, if OpenAI is ready to go public, I mean, Oracle is an OpenAI proxy. And look, if Anthropic goes public and it's effective and it is successful, OpenAI is probably going to go public early 27. And if they go public, I think a lot of the sentiment around Oracle being a proxy and OpenAI not being able to pay their bills is going to go away, which is why, even though I don't love those companies, I want them to be successful IPOs because it really helps with the broader CapEx story. But yeah, Oracle's up a lot in the past 2 weeks. I know it was down a lot. And so I think this negative 2% is kind of just Oracle consolidating. What about XLV? So I've been hearing people talk about this. Healthcare has made a move this year already. Now, the question is how much more juice is there left to squeeze? out of XLV, which is the healthcare ETF. And I don't know, because healthcare is not some explosive sector. I mean, XLV is up 8% this year. Historically, I think it averages around that range. Healthcare is not a sector where you're going to have massive growth, but you have a lot of mean reversion on names like Molina and UNH and Tempest, which has now started catching a bit of a bid. But I don't know if by the end of the year, like UNH is a $500 stock, because I think you would need that type of movement, or at least like 450 to get XLV to be a lot more excited. But generally, healthcare and AI's impact on healthcare is super bullish, which is important. Netflix was up yesterday because their ad inventories continue to go higher. They're seeing a lot of demand for advertising. Last week or yesterday, they announced that. So that's why I think you're seeing it get more momentum. Yeah, and if AI ever starts to fall again, healthcare, Apple, those are the names that tend to rally the most. ServiceNow getting a bid. Robinhood trying to get it up to 95 right here. So it's kind of like a safety play in case things get hit in a much more aggressive way. T1 Energy, solar space. This one could be extremely undervalued if their execution on solar in the context of data centers works. I don't think the administration is on the side of solar yet, but they're definitely on the side of increasing data center capacity, which would obviously help the T1s of the world. Rocket Lab trying to get back up into 80. When does Marvell have earnings? That's not today, right? That would be, I think, CoreWeave is today. We'll look at their preview in a second. Marvell's not this week. Marvell should be next week. Today is CoreWeave, Lumentum's. Oh, wow, we have SMCI today. And Kava. CoreWeave, Lumentum, SMCI. 27th August. Oh, they're reporting a day after NVIDIA. Okay, so we have a couple weeks for that. Wow, dude, so you have a photonics name, you have a server rack name, and then you have a neo cloud, all reporting at the same time. Let's do a poll on that. Which one you guys think will do well? That's gonna be interesting. SMCI already told us their margins doubled, so I think the street was excited about that. But SMCI is always kind of funky on earnings. One pumps the most after hours? SMCI, Light, CoreWeave. And then the fourth option is that they all dump. Cerebras is not today. I don't think it's today. Robin at 94.50. Where's Soundhound? That was one of the best winners last week. Got a 20% move, still holding on to some of it, but definitely lost about 8% of it. Why is Google down? I still don't know. Why is Meta still up? Wow. Okay, dude, there's got to be news on Meta. Why 3% on a $1.5 trillion company? I mean, they just added in market cap. About 40 billion of market cap. I know it's not crazy, but Meta's kind of been stuck below 600 for a while, so I feel like there's got to be something here. It's very choppy. Agreed. It's very choppy. Yeah, I'm not seeing any big headline on it. Rocket Lab back to 80. It's trying. Robin is trying to get to 95. Does Rocket Lab have resistance at 80? Actually, no. Rocket Lab's chart looks really freaking good right now. It had resistance at around 77. It broke through that pretty nicely. Let's see if you can break 30. I don't know why Circle's pumping. Dude, Circle, Meta, a lot of these names. I'm not seeing any headlines on this. Someone just bought 780. Oh, this is interesting. Someone just bought $785,000 of $15 calls expiring November 20th of DJT. They're buying DJT calls after the midterms. Huh. By the way, I was looking at the prediction market odds yesterday. Trump has a 3.2% chance to win in 2028. And Vance is leading with 20%. Then you have Rubio at 15. Then you have, what's his name? Newsom at 11. So the Democratic majority consensus in the prediction markets is Newsom. Kamala's at 5. You got Shapiro up there at 7. So it looks like it's Vance versus Newsom right now, if you have to call it today. But that's interesting. That's a good chunk of premium they're putting into these DJT calls. For Trump, that's Barron Trump. It might be Barron. It might be AEHR reversing right there. Air Test Systems, that's up 9 now. Hertz is up 20 on the lawsuit. Yeah, this is going to be interesting, dude. It looks like it's Newsom versus Vance right now. But again, anything can change. I mean, we're still so far away. You could have so many different candidates come through and kind of change the entire way that it plays out. Iran foreign minister, the meeting between the Pakistani Minister of Interior and the Minister of Foreign Affairs has happened. The Minister of Interior of Pakistan met with the Minister of Foreign Affairs in Iran this Tuesday afternoon for a meeting and discussion, as being reported by Iranian state media. Okay, so the meeting has at least happened. rklb got rejected at 79.50. Now it's 78.50. Micron is down 1. Fell to 844 for some reason 2 minutes ago. Got to bounce off 844. UNH is still flat. DRAM trying to get up there. TSM flat. NVIDIA below 220. Amit, you should run. You know, I'll probably run one day when I'm bored. But I think for now, my purpose is better served as a financial media commentator. I think eventually I'll serve the country and I'll fix all this shit we've got going on. But like for now, we've got to make money, bro. We've got to make money. I also want to be rich before I become president. Like, I don't want to be president and want to make money by being president. I want to like have my money so that I don't need to make money while being the president, you know? So I feel like I'll focus on that first. Not even old enough to run. Dude, I forgot. Why did they pick 35? Why is 35 the age? It's such an arbitrary number. This person has to be 35 years old. Why not 34? 29. What's your view on the Unitree IPO? I mean, it's oversubscribed, so it's going to pump. I need to go through the S1, dude. I don't think these robotics companies have any real fundamentals. I think they have purchase orders that are like not really actual purchase orders. The most important AI robotic companies are still private for a reason. Like, I think it's going to take a while before they actually become productive. So, but I think people are going to want to pile in because robots are exciting. Unitree's robots also aren't bad. It's just, I don't know if they're like the cream of the crop robots that are, you know, going to be creating all this productivity. But, you know, if Unitree can say, hey, we're selling, you know, millions of robots a year to all these Chinese enterprises, I wonder what it does for Chinese economy, because a lot of their labor is in manufacturing, and that's what robots are supposed to replace. So, you know, that could create a domestic issue for China. And I wonder what the government would do, because if the government doesn't like it, they'll just ban it immediately. But also, I wonder if the robots are actually effective enough to serve and do complex Chinese manufacturing. Because if they are, then, you know, maybe we are making real progress, and maybe the timeline for IPO for American companies is more likely than not. So we're going to have to see. SK Hynix is up 3% while Micron is down, which is kind of interesting here. You can't wear slide through the suit. I feel like if you're the president, you can do anything. I feel like if you're the president, you can literally do anything. So hopefully they don't get mad at me. Dude, the worst thing about being like a politician is like people will find every single thing you've ever said or done, and it'll be out in the open. And that's the scary part. That's probably the reason I never would want to run. Outside of the fact that I don't think I'm qualified to run the country or anything, but like it's just so scary. Everyone will find everything about you and put it out into the open. So it's not a fun way to navigate this. Yeah, they will find the clip of me saying greeny green, exactly. The basis point clip would go crazy. Epsilera, are we hitting 10? Wow, there it is, $10. Okay, volume's at 4 million. It looks like some big boy volume coming in given the nature of this stock. Let's see if it can actually hold above 10. That's a massive, massive move for Epsilera compared to some of the other biotechs this week. Davis as a first man would be wild. That's crazy. Okay. That's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Ondas, is that up a little bit right here? Ondas, that's up 1.5. Seeing a little bit of momentum on the defense names. ASML getting a pump. Are we seeing a little 1030 reversal? Rocket Lab trying to get right back to 79.50. Google, can we get a move? Google's still flat. SpaceX just flipped from the 132 low, still red. It's just choppy, guys. Like, look, Nebius went to 187, now back to 194. Like, it's just really choppy. I don't think the market has a direction per se that they want to go at. Saidu Space, is that running? Saidu Space, that's up 3%. Not a massive run, but it is up. What are you hiding? I'm not hiding anything. It's just I've said a lot of shit on these streams for the past 4 years. And with AI, I mean, someone probably will just ask an LLM to what's all the crazy shit Amit has said before, and then boom, you just have all these clips. And then I'm done. I'm done. Dude, I was crazier in 22 and 23 with some of the stuff I said because, you know, there weren't as many people. So, like, you don't feel that crazy saying some of this stuff to, like, 100 people. And then, like, you know, you say some stuff one day and you're like, how many people were there? And you're like, oh, that was probably not the right thing to say with that many people, you know? So it's like, now I still take some risks with the things I say in front of a lot of people because you got to take some risks. But 2022, I was acting like no one was watching, even though some people were. And so those clips are going to be, you know, not the best. But then you guys get me to say this Mike HAWK nonsense, and then it ends up becoming a clip. I accidentally sent a message to this chat thinking it was my work keyboard. Iceberg, what did you send? Did you take away that comment? What was that comment? We got to see it. Did you say, guys, I'm running late. I need 5 minutes? In reality, you're just checking your stocks. Don't want to log on to boring ass Teams meeting. Dude, Teams sucks. I had to use it the other day for something I had to join. I was like, this product genuinely is just like not a good product. For some reason, every time you're meeting with a company, they send you a Teams link. I'm like, why? Why can't you just use Zoom? It's easier. Sandus right there, 1256. That's up 1.5%. As that continues to go green. Jensen tweet. Okay. Dude, Jensen needs to tweet something spicy, bro. He's tweeting all this corporate shit. He's obviously not writing these tweets. We need him to, like, you know, we need him to tweet some shit that lets us know it's him. He quote tweeted NVIDIA, lightning strikes for continuous and long run agents. Nemotron 3.5 lightning is a smart, fast, efficient, and open. Okay, that's boring. We need something cool, Jensen. He quoted Elon, which was kind of cool. Rocket Lab CEO is going to be on Bloomberg. Okay, let me pull that up. Thank you for letting me know. I'll make sure we have that ready to see. Yeah, he needs to tweet about, like, not waking up a loser. Oh, he's live. Okay, Peter Beck. Let's get into this right now.
CEO Peter Beck. Peter, thank you so much for joining. Can you clarify any confusion about Neutron? So yesterday it seemed like you were pushing back the date of the launch a little bit. Is Neutron still on track to actually launch off its launch pad this year, 2026?
Yeah, I think probably your headline's overblown it a little bit. What I did say is that it's getting a little bit tighter to get a launch away this year, which is just being honest and transparent. It's a rocket program. They're very, very difficult and complex and large programs. But our intention here is to still definitely push hard to go try and get a first flight away this year. But I think the real question that should be asking is what about the 10th flight? Because these programs, obviously first flight is important, but flight number 10 is actually really, really important because that shows that you've got into a full sense of scale and cadence and reusability, which is really the most important thing for the whole program.
I see us on the word there, cadence. Tell us a bit about that, how you're thinking about the cadence going forward here and the viable path to getting there to a regular cadence.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at our current vehicle, Electron, we actually scaled that faster than any other, rocket in history. So we went from, to 0 to 50 flights in the shortest time in history, and we're on track to, get to 100 flights in the shortest time in history with that vehicle too. So we know a thing or two about, taking a rocket, putting it on the pad, and then flying it over and over again. But Neutron's really important for a few reasons. I think a lot of people focus on it plugging a hole and providing competition for a Falcon 9, which is an important part of its job. But Rocket Lab is an end-to-end space company, meaning that we build satellites both for ourselves and for other people. And with our pending acquisition of Iridium, we really need our rocket to launch our own satellites. So at least 50% of Neutron's capacity is going to be consumed by ourselves.
Obviously, SpaceX was able to raise a humongous amount of cash recently. Peter, how do you intend to continue to raise cash in order to fund some of these expensive endeavors?
Well, I think we're a little bit different than SpaceX. Elon has very grand aspirations that require a lot of cash. For us, we're in the business of getting into cash flow positivity as quickly as we can. And if you look at some of the acquisitions that we've done in the past and about to do, that puts us in that realm very, very quickly. So I think we have a very different sort of profile to the other two big rocket guys. Start off where I'm certainly not the richest. Two of the richest people in the world are our competitors, so they have a totally different cost of capital and sense of capital. We've always been that rocket company that has had to be very commercial from day one, and we're about building a good solid book and a commercial enterprise that's enduring and making money.
I look at the report, backlog, $2.36 billion with 90+ launches here. How should we look at that? How should investors look at that backlog? And at what point does it become something that should maybe raise some concern with investors if it gets to be a certain size or it gets to grow bigger and bigger yet?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think everybody loves a great big backlog, and I think between the last quarter and now we added nearly $1 billion of backlog, to the company. So, but backlog is a great metric, but execution is the true measure. And if you look at the company, I think we've established ourselves as as a very strong executors. Previously and throughout history, we do what we say we're going to do.
The Iridium deal, as you say, that's pending complete completion, it potentially opens the door for direct-to-device products and that market. How do you see that faring, and particularly against some of your competitors, such as SpaceX?
Yeah, so look, I've been saying this for many, many years, and I think it's been proven out with evidence from other companies. But the really large space companies of the future are going to look all a little bit the same. They're going to have the ability to build satellites at scale, the ability to launch their own satellites with their own rocket, and have a bit of a communications or a comms play. And Iridium is the entry point for us. It's by no means the end point. And one of the reasons why we like the Iridium platform so much is that it has a very unique spectrum, being an L-band spectrum, that allows you to do very unique things. And Iridium has built an amazing business on the back of safety critical, defense critical infrastructure. And, that's something that we'll continue to, to grow and push. I don't think you're going to see us going head to head in the broadband market. I think that's very well served and a tough place to be. But I think there's a tremendous opportunity in some of these more discrete and unique areas of the comms market.
Peter, talk to us about the Kepler deal, which you announced yesterday, this deal with Kepler Communications, purchasing a dedicated launch of Neutron for no earlier than 2028. How important is that to you in the business?
Well, it's funny because, I think naturally a lot of people would expect that we just should, sell all of the rockets that we have for eternity. And if we were just a rocket company, that would be a great assumption. But, we have to assure that we have rockets left in production and available to launch for our own aspirations. Also for, some of our defense customers who need assured access to space. And, right now, I've never seen the rocket industry and launch so constrained. So for us, we are extremely selective about who we give up this very valuable capacity to on the Neutron rocket. So, it was great to have the Kepler guys on contract. We've known that team for a very long time. But it is a very very kind of constrained environment right now that we have to navigate carefully.
Peter, what's the detailed plan for getting to cash flow positive? Is it just a matter of time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Neutron, after we have the first flight of Neutron and we flick into commercial, flights, that is a huge point, inflection point for the company. And then, of course, any acquisition like Iridium does that immediately. So we have a fairly short time horizon to that.
I look at that pantheon of Mynaric and Motive and Iridium, which we've talked about. Are you hungry for more deals yet, or are we going to a pause here in terms of the company's acquisitive stance?
Yeah, never done. I mean, look, all of those acquisitions have been very strategic, and I think launch is a tremendous moat, and everybody can see that. It's the big show in the sky. But actually, we acquired a whole bunch of component companies and scaled those, and components are just as much of a moat. So, no matter how much capital you had, if you just turn up and say, I want to build 1,000 satellites, you just can't, because there's just not the supply chain there to go and provide all of the components for the spacecraft. So for us, I mean, that's not a constraint for us, of course, but for other people entering the market, it's a huge constraint. So you'll continue to see us, tuck in those little deals in the side, but deals like Iridium certainly aren't going to be the last. And you shouldn't think of us as the L-band comms company. This is the first of many, I would say.
All right. Well, stock is very close to session highs, down just 1.8% now, Peter.
Okay, so the main thing there, once again, is that cash flow positivity is coming, profitability is coming, but obviously Neutron is delayed again, and that's why the stock has kind of been hit. Zeta right there, breaking above 28. Let's see if we can get back to 28.50. If we can, 30 does not seem that far away. Accelera 10.23. That's up another 10% on the day as that continues to make its move. Circles up 6. Ondas is up 1. SpaceX down 2. Rock Lab trying to get back to 80, but basically flat. Nebius loses 193 again. And now you're seeing 190.82 as at least it is up 3%, holding 190. So you got Zeta, Circle, and Meta kind of making the run today across the across the market. CoreWeave right there, 88.75. That's also up 0.5%. Axon's up 5, which is nice to see. The stock again got hit pretty badly. Lows were like 350 back in the SaaS apocalypse, and 339. I mean, it's basically doubled. SaaS is back. Talking about a doubling in 3 months. SaaS is absolutely back right here. The question is, can we get back to the official all-time high? ServiceNow has got to be green today. Yep, ServiceNow trying to go for 130. It was at 140 at the end of May, so it might not be crazy to see it get back. IBM continues to make its move, 204 to 240, as that is getting some love. Qualcomm up a little bit right here. I think it's going to be hard for Qualcomm to run unless the semis run again. Like a lot of these names, they just need the semis to really, really run. because most of them went up with the semis versus independently of the semis. Micron right there still stuck at 850. Zeta trying to break 2850. And then Reddit's somewhat green right here. Oh, the camera's frozen. Hold on. Let's try to fix that. Let's see. Okay. Should be fixed. Should be fixed. NVIDIA trying to test 217. Where is NVIDIA? We actually didn't look at it. NVIDIA is at 219. It was almost at 225 yesterday, before it took a little bit of the beating. Oil is still somewhat flat today, slightly down. Texas Governor Abbott says Oracle commits to comply with data center standards. You're seeing a lot more of these governors come out demanding that these data center companies actually like meaningfully commit to certain frameworks that they have around building data centers. Palantir trying to go for 177 again. And what's his name in Florida? DeSantis came out with that. So it's not really just, Democrats. Like, Florida's not going as far to completely ban data centers for a year, but they definitely want to make sure that people don't end up paying the price that actually live near the data centers themselves. By the way, Vlad just tweeted a video. Here is what he put out.
As Robinhood Ventures continues to scale, our goal is for it to be an anomaly to not have retail in your seed or Series A cap table.
It was through that idea that Fund 2 was born. A basket of 80 companies from Y Combinator's newest cohorts this year that we believe have the most potential. What's most exciting about these is not just that they're new companies, but they're also new ideas.
So look, this ventures fund thing is going to be interesting, but it's only going to work if the companies they pick end up working. They're picking very, very early stage companies. So yeah, and that's kind of what you want as a VC, right? You want the opportunity for a 50, 100, 1000x. But to get that, a lot of failure has to happen in between. So I think the idea makes sense. The fees Robinhood's going to make sense. It's just a question of, for every 80 companies they invest in, can they get 2 or 3 to like really be the big ones? And that's what time will tell. By the way, take a look at this chart from Bloomberg. Hyperscaler CapEx, 2.6 trillion has already been committed. Google being the largest at 811 billion in contractual commitments, 85 billion in leases. Oracle's at 260 billion in leases that have not yet commenced. This right here is why Oracle is getting hit this year. They only have 32 billion in commitments that are contractual, 260 billion, a lot of that probably from OpenAI. That's kind of just like an MOU effectively. And the other companies, have a bit more contractual stuff. Google has the most, and I think part of that has to do with the SpaceX deal they have. So this chart right here is why Micron probably should be $1,000 stock, even if you're concerned about different things in the memory cycle, right? It's probably why Nebius should be higher core. I mean, like the amount of money that these guys are going to be putting into that ecosystem, it's all going to go into earnings for these smaller companies. And then Jensen's got another 500 billion coming in. It's just, when does that stop? Because if it stops by 2028, the discounted cash flows will happen much sooner than that. And those names won't be that attractive. But if it's not stopping, for the next 5 years, again, one could argue it's a lot more cheaper. Every month, data centers get denied or banned, then approved. This can't be ignored forever. It will come to bite the data center build out at some point. Let's ask Gemini, give me all the latest updates on data centers being banned or denied recently. Let's see what it says. Palantir, did we get 177? We did. 177.50. Hood's trying to get back to 94. TSM up 1% on the day. Cerebras is up. Citi did raise Zeta's price target today to 35 as well. So that's also probably part of the reason why Zeta's getting some love. Okay, so Texas had a grid freeze. Abbott ordered the state's utility commission to halt new data center grid connections. New York, obviously, we saw what Governor Kathy Hochul did. New Jersey, Millville, New Jersey adopted a unanimous ban on new data centers. Wow, I didn't know this. To block a massive 1.4 gigawatt campus proposal. Meanwhile, Indianapolis advanced a citywide pause on new approvals through 2027 pending final commission votes. Where is Millville, New Jersey? I've never heard of that. I know a decent amount of places in Jersey. There's 27,000 people that live here. Millville, New Jersey. Oh, that's where it is. It's at the very bottom of the state. Well, it goes to show the entire world is not on board with the data center build out. It's just as investors, you know, we want it to happen ASAP. By the way, this tweet I thought was hilarious. So Apple did a deal with Klarna last week for iPhone financing to save $5 a month, basically $20 a month, $30 a month. Their market cap's $4.5 trillion. NVIDIA did a $500 billion deal to essentially get $500 billion of revenue to build more money for AI infrastructure. Their market cap is only slightly above Apple's. Like, it's kind of funny how the market, if the market was really giving NVIDIA Apple's premium, this thing would be well over $7 trillion by now. But that's just not, it once again goes back to predictability and cyclicality. The market believes Apple's cash flows will be around for a long time. The market is not sure that that's the same for NVIDIA. And that's where you get the discounting. Palantir, is she trying? Accelera, still a nice move, 8%. DJT still up 1%. AEHR up 11%, which is very nice. We need to break 179 on Palantir. And then maybe 150 is possible. Apple is down ever since the Leopold situation was the top for Apple and the bottom for semis. As Apple continues to go red. Can we discuss Reddit? I think the street's still concerned about their search referral traffic. The earnings were amazing. We talked about it last week. I bought the dip at 147. I think a lot of people bought the dip. But for this thing to get back into the 200s, you need an AI licensing deal and you need the street to not be worried about where Google traffic is going. And I think Reddit's getting ready to try to do like a very large, hopefully $1 billion deal to license their data. I mean, I would imagine like 60 million last year felt crazy given the amount of data they have and the quality of that data. So I feel like they should be able to get a good chunk of cash for it. Maybe not $1 billion, but eventually. And that's the deal that I think, takes Reddit up 10% in a day when they announce it, which I do think can happen. Zeta 2834, highs of day. SoFi, are we up? SoFi also making a nice little move. Robinhood also above 94. So fintech's getting a little bit more love right now. As rklb is back to 80. Dude, it's just choppy back and forth. It's just choppy back and forth. Now it's a little bit more green. We got to see if we can hold on to it. Zeta 2845. That one's actually getting some real volume. Was there news on Meta? There might have been, but we have not seen the news. So probably there wasn't. But that one's still green. The people that protest data centers are the same people that use AI to research and explain their position. It was funny. They had a representative from the Democratic Socialist Party of America on the other day. And, they were like, so what do you, what's your proposal? And she was like, we need to tax all the millionaires. And the guy was just like, okay, how would we allocate the money? She didn't really have the best answer for it, which is kind of what ends up happening when you have these sort of radical proposals, left or right. The plan and the execution of it is not necessarily easy to describe. But, nonetheless, this is the nature of politics, right? You have a lot of people in a lot of different directions. Microsoft 503, Mamdani took a shot at Amazon yesterday and basically said Amazon needs to stop using subcontractors and have more rights for employees that are delivering packages directly. Amazon has been against unions for forever. So, Amazon got kicked out of New York by not having their HQ there a couple years ago when AOC made a big deal about them. So it's that inevitable fight that happens with some of these larger players and the politicians that essentially use them to, make their case and get people to agree with how they should be governed. Mercado Libre up 4%. That's getting a move. Zeta 2830. Let's see if 2850 we can break. Robinhood losing 94. Not really able to hold on to it that well. And the rest of these stocks kind of flat. S&P is basically flat. Data centers have existed for decades. Why the buzz now? I think the marketing of AI, of only a few people are getting rich because of these data centers, is getting people upset. And then obviously the data centers are a bit more intensive with the amount of infrastructure that's being built. And so Rocket Lab now trying to hold above 80. If people don't feel like they are getting the benefit from that, that's where it ends up going the wrong way. But I think that's also the job of Jensen and a lot of these other AI thought leaders to, get people to believe how important it is. That's why Jensen gets pissed off every time Dario says everyone's going to lose their job. Because I think Jensen's just like, bro, you can't say that shit. Like, it's like no one's going to like you if you tell everyone they're going to be miserable because of large language models. And, Dario hasn't necessarily been better at communicating this. Let's get a bit of an update from that NVIDIA deal that we saw earlier today. Let me pull this up. I think if I have it. Let's see. Oh, this was Evercore said, this is what I was looking for. Evercore says, based on this NVIDIA deal, they feel the S&P 500 now will be 9,000 by the end of 2027. So if we end the year at 8,000, which, would be cool. You're talking about a 12% move next year to 9,000, which is not massive move. But the question is, if we're getting 9,000 from these levels or below, it's going to be a pretty big rally. If we're getting it from 8,000, it would still be kind of crazy. But this NVIDIA thing is, along with a couple other factors they brought up, basically they're like, the earnings growth is going to continue. It's not necessarily stopping. We don't know why the S&P can't get 9,000. Then you have Ed Yardeni's thesis, which is 10,000 by 2030 for the S&P. Tom Lee's ultra bull case a year ago was 15,000 by 2030. I don't know if he still believes in that. It might be a little tough to get there, but if we were, it would be pretty massive regardless. Here is what Evercore said today on their targets.
The times that it's been disrupted have either been sort of AI jitters or macro concerns. And frankly, we just got through an AI jitter period that ended in July. The hyperscalers' earnings price reactions showed us that we've gone past it. And frankly, when you think about all the financing and the deals that have been announced the last few days, you see that the AI revolution is very much alive and well, but it's dependent on capital markets. And the issue, as we've seen several times, is when yields get to a level where they're providing more competition for corporate debt, and it appears to be approaching that level, that causes the markets to hesitate. And we think that that's a period that we're approaching.
But as we sit here at 4.733% on the 10-year yield, Julian, we hear about this deal for NVIDIA's customers through this consortium of banks and people who will look for capital basically on the behalf of NVIDIA customers. Do you think that maybe this whole AI build-out's a little bit vulnerable? I mean, the fact that these customers will get preferential yields on loans made to buy NVIDIA infrastructure, I don't know, does the whole thing seem a little fragile or does it seem stronger?
Well, I wouldn't describe it as fragile. What it is we're living through an age where the creativity around financial markets is very, very intense. And who would have thought of the deal that got announced yesterday until we saw it on CNBC yesterday afternoon? That's the kind of innovation that keeps capital markets moving forward. But again, you get to a point when you think about the transmission mechanism of oil into yields where it becomes a macro headwind for stocks approaching September, which tends to be a little bit more difficult, and approaching the midterms, which if you look at the last two midterm elections, we've had a lot of fall volatility.
Do you look at the announcement yesterday, and now I'm talking about the AI announcement, as more than, I mean, there's sort of two views of it. One is that it is a full-on commitment. Another view is this is an MOU that is no different than what NVIDIA did with OpenAI 6 months or a year ago now.
Well, I think 2026 will be the dichotomy between full-on commitments and MOUs, both politically and technologically and et cetera. What it shows is this commitment in the bigger picture to continue to facilitate the AI build-out with the expectation that productivity is going to show the boost that we believe it will in the coming years. And frankly, again, if you think about the demographic headwinds and you think about where things are moving, it makes a lot of sense to us.
But you think a yield above 4.8% is going to be difficult for the markets?
If you look at the history of this, it's almost 4 years since ChatGPT was announced to the world. You've risen above 480, and that essentially has stopped markets in its tracks. And I go back to last year, and remember the political discourse around the tariff transfer was sensitivity around the 10-year yield. We seem to have taken our eye off that ball a little bit.
Yeah, the two-year yield is at 4.255. Do you think if we get sort of indications the Fed is going to hike in September, and the odds with yields are going higher as we approach that meeting at this point, it's like 50-something% that they're going to hike in September. Is that going to be a good signal for the market? Will that be enough for the markets to sort of move on? The belief that the Fed is identifying inflation as a worry?
Well, so first off, we're not entirely certain that we're going to get that much heads up. Mm-hmm. If you think about how Warsh has conducted the last couple of months, it may feel like it's going to be a coin flip into that September 16th meeting. But in general, I think the market would rather see the intent to hike because, in fact, it has a chance to dampen longer-term yields because you keep inflation expectations anchored.
You have a target of 9,000 on the S&P 500 by the end of next year. Is that right?
Well,
end of 27.
End of 27.
What we've said, and we said this at the beginning of the year, 77.50 is the base case, but under the right circumstances, and the right circumstances being, extreme capital markets activity, FOMO like we've seen at the peak of every structural technology-driven bull market, that you could move as high as 9,000. And what we didn't expect, we thought 9,000 at the beginning of this year looked more like a bubble. But guess what? Earnings have surprised everyone to the upside. And so, frankly, 9,000 is no longer even a bubble type thought. We think you can get there before the cycle ends.
It's just, can we keep up the earnings growth? And, it's interesting. He says before the cycle ends, which begs the question, when will the cycle end? And if it's close to ending, the 9,000 gets discounted pretty quickly. If the cycle ends at like 12,000, the 9,000 is very possible. But if the cycle ends at 10,000, it'll touch 9,000, but then it'll get pulled back because the market will sniff out that things are, not as pretty. So it is a big question. I mean, put in the chat, when do you think the cycle ends? And when I mean the cycle, I mean like this, I don't know if I want to say secular bull market we've been in since 2009 or AI-driven bull market we've been in since 2023. I guess we'll say AI-driven bull market. I mean, for us to lose the secular bull market, I feel like a lot of things would have to happen. Obviously, you would need a massive, you would need either a big credit event, a bubble implosion, or just a crazy recession caused by some type of event that, as Zeta breaks through 2850 right there. And all we're seeing is earnings growth, GDP, productivity, all that stuff kind of denies those conventional arguments. rklb trying to hold above 80. It touched 80.7 and then it got rejected. So then it begs the question, when does this AI-driven bull market, approach 9 a.m. at the party, as Dan Ives would say? 2031, 2032. I mean, even Jensen has acknowledged it is a bubble and it will eventually pop. We played that clip last week. He just said, his exact quote was, I think for the next 5 to 10 years, we're okay. So he's acknowledging eventually it will be over, and all these companies, either people are going to sell off their stocks or people are going to have to figure out how to believe in NVIDIA, even if they're not growing the way that they're growing. And I'm sure Jensen's working on what that next phase of NVIDIA looks like 10 years from now. Yeah, 2030, 2032-ish, I think, is kind of the consensus on that. So we might have to see. As Brooks, thank you for the super chat, man. Appreciate it. Thank you for the $10. Thank you for being here and being part of the show. Cycle ends mid-2028. I don't know, bro. Mid-2028. I don't think that's crazy to say if the CapEx slows down. Next year is going to be really important. I mean, this year was really important to see the CapEx continuing. Next year is going to be also really important to see the 2028 guidance of that CapEx continuing to increase as well. We have 5 years to escape the permanent underclass. That, it was really funny after this Jensen announcement yesterday. Someone basically said, okay, so we have 2 years left to make money because after that, this shit's blowing up. And you can't even blame people for saying that. It's like, look, it is so much money, so much leverage entering into the ecosystem. It has to be executed so perfectly in terms of the allocation of capital. Like, they can make mistakes, but they have to make very minimal mistakes when actually putting this money into the ecosystem. Because if not, yeah, it's going to blow up. And I think Jensen's figuring it out on the way. I think like he's, as the world is progressing, he's trying to figure out, how do I keep up my growth? How do I make sure the data centers are legit? How do I make sure Anthropic and OpenAI don't fail? How do I also make sure they don't compete with me? Which is why he's pushing this Nemotron stuff. How do I make sure everyone's financed to keep buying chips? How do I make sure that South Korea's economy doesn't collapse because 2 companies are holding it up and I'm their biggest customer? Like, there's so much pressure that's on this guy. And then he has to deliver shareholder returns. Like, if the stock doesn't go up, that's another issue. Because, now everyone's invested in NVIDIA. I mean, most people came into NVIDIA around, I would say, 2.7 to 3 trillion. I know there's a lot of people that probably bought it below that. But really, when the stock was around like 140, 150 is when I think a lot of people flooded in. It's up from there, but it's not like up crazy from there. And so a lot of people have an expectation that they bought this thing at 150 and it's inevitably going to go to 300 and they'll be able to retire off their NVIDIA stock and pay for their college tuition off of it. And like, he needs to deliver on that. So that's just even more pressure that you have on NVIDIA. By the way, all those fancy CEOs yesterday, they didn't know how to say NVIDIA. They kept saying NVIDIA. And I was like, you're about to give this guy $500 billion. You don't know how to say his name? Is oil popping? Oil just went up about 0.5%, 82.30. We'll see if we get any Iran news that could be coming in. U.S. auto loans hit a record high of $211 billion. According to the New York Fed that just came out. NY Fed reported a small improvement delinquency rate to 4.7, so that's actually better than what was expected. NY Fed reports credit card balances increased by $21 billion to $1.26 trillion in Q2. But credit card delinquency rates have leveled off in the past 2 years, but still remain high, according to the New York Fed economist. Okay, so that $21 billion actually isn't that big of an increase Q over Q compared to what we had in Q4 of 25. But obviously, 1.26 trillion is still a lot of credit card debt. I do know how to say Nevada, okay? It's Nevada. That's how you say it. Don't say Nevada wrong. I definitely don't say NVIDIA wrong, except when I call it NVIDIA. Jason will be on today, yes, for TT. He'll be on. He just had a baby girl last week, so it'll be fun to talk to him and get his take on some of the stuff that's going on right here. Dylan, thank you for the super chat. I don't think we can play that Michael Saylor song again because it will trigger way too many people. I genuinely couldn't believe he posted that, dude. I mean, I could believe it because it's Burry, but like, I was just like, whoa, he actually is making a joke out of this because the sentiment is so bad on the stock that it's like, you have to have something to get people to be excited about. I do say Iren wrong. It's Iren. The actual way to say Iren is Iren. That is correct. But it looks like Iren. So I've always said Iren. Yeah, this price action is weird, man. NVIDIA still stuck. ServiceNow trying to break out. At least Zeta is above 28.50, and a hold above that would be really nice. Hoodie, we tried for 94.50. We're at 94.40 now. That one got rejected at around 94.67. Archer's up 10. Looks like the street likes the earnings. It also had that big move right after they announced the acquisition, so kind of getting right back to that level, full 20% for the week. It's definitely Nebius, not Nebius, because Jensen says Nebius and Jensen's not wrong. Oh, we didn't even talk about Burry. I mean, you guys probably know this, but for those that didn't watch the close yesterday or did not see the tweet, Burry bought more puts on Palantir, March 2027 $100 strikes. And he says, I think the company shares are worth under $1 in the long run. I think genuinely the guy is bored and he just wants to rage bait and he wants people to read his Substack. And the easiest way to do that is to be pretty hyperbolic. Like, I could understand buying puts. It's like, whatever, he's adding to his short position. But then saying it's worth under $1, it's like, okay, come on. Like, it's just so, it's so absurd. It's like you start to lose some credibility when you get that hyperbolic and say this type of stuff. So, I don't think it's worth under $1. I think Burry will be wrong about that. I don't know if we easily see 100. I mean, look, if we see $100 again on Palantir by March 2027, the S&P probably took a really big dump over the next 7 months. And that's very possible. I would try to figure out how that happens with the earnings growth. So I think the puts are like a Hail Mary, and then the hyperbolic statement is a way to make sense of the puts. Even though logically, there's not a lot of analysis there that I think can make sense of not only the trajectory of their growth, but what just happened on those earnings, which I think obviously were pretty massive. Grab right there, that's up 3%. Should be benefiting from Melly and C Limited. So seeing the international stocks get a little bit of love. Circle, that's up 6. Hertz is up 17 on that class action lawsuit. S&P is... Dude, what is this price? It's been stuck within 50 cents all day. It should bounce right here, 772.80. You should see a small bounce if it respects the price action of the lows today. But outside of that, nothing big is happening with some of the price action. He doesn't have to release the 13F anymore because he's not managing a public fund. Let's see if we have any of the other 13Fs. We should be getting a lot more of them next week. Okay, we got Christopher Davis from Davis Advisors, manages $23 billion. Archer up 11%. Let's see if there's anything interesting here. He added to Amazon, 4 million shares. Added to Devon Energy Group, 25 million shares. That's a new buy. Sold a lot of financials. Sold 5% of Google. Added to C Limited. That's doing well. Added to Microsoft and NVIDIA, 18% to Microsoft, 36% to NVIDIA. Sold Schwab, added 50% to Adobe. The big guys are buying software. They've been buying software all year. And that software rally is now paying off. He bought SBA Communications. Wow, he added 47% to Fermi, which is up today. So that should be doing well. And then sold 50% of his TSM, Realty Income. Sold some Bank of America, so nothing too crazy. Vulcan Value Partners, they managed $3.2 billion. Sold 11% of their Microsoft in Q2. Added 31% to MasterCard. Sold 20% of their Google. Added 7% to ServiceNow. Nebius just fell below 190. They bought Equifax. They bought Viva Systems. That's doing well. They sold 17% of their their Salesforce. So far, based on the disclosures we have by larger investors, we're still waiting for a decent chunk of them. We've had, how many get released so far? 16. We're looking for about 80. The top 10 buys so far, take this with a grain of salt because we're still looking for 70 more of these disclosures. But Accenture, Visa, Disney, Berkshire Hathaway, UNH, Devon Energy Group, Amazon, Equifax, NVIDIA, and Comcast. Those are your top 10 buys so far by the super investors in Q2. Kathy did a bunch of buying today as well. Let me put up what she bought. She actually bought a ton of NVIDIA. That Accenture bet is not necessarily doing well. That thing fell pretty badly on their earnings. Kathy bought 46,000 shares of Cloudflare. She bought Broadcom. She bought NVIDIA. She bought Teradyne. Oh, yeah, you're right. 13Fs actually should be out on Friday. Technically, you're right. We should get most of them on Friday, if not on Monday. We also get Leopold's, even though that would be a little tilted because obviously he sold a lot of stuff recently. She bought NVIDIA, Broadcom. She sold some Palantir. Bought a ton more NVIDIA. Bought NVIDIA in pretty much every fund. Sold some Shopify. Sold some Snowflake. So really NVIDIA was the name Kathy bought the most yesterday. Kathy had NVIDIA for a long time, back in 2022. Yesterday, but they sold a bunch of it in 23 and they're buying a bunch more now. Tesla 334. Hey guys, nothing that crazy today. Even the Iran headlines, we had something in the morning, but nothing else happening right now. CME Group will also launch compute futures on October 5th. Okay, it looks like compute as an asset class is definitely happening. October 5th, CME Group. I wonder what the volume of that would look like. I also wonder how they're gonna calculate the cost of compute and what it, like how to, sell a package of derivatives around compute. So there will definitely be a lot of questions for how the street interprets that, and also what it means for asset prices when you have that much leverage entering into the futures market. Palantir getting a dump right here. Meta as well losing some steam. The VIX is kind of flat. Where's the VIX? Robinhood also not really. It is typical August stuff. I mean, people are on vacation. There's not. I mean, look, I thought the NVIDIA news was pretty big news. I thought the market might somewhat react to it, but the fact that the market's not is just showing how much it's a show me story versus a tell me story. VIX is down 1%. We have not seen VIX above 20 in how long? Okay, the last time we had VIX above 20 was one day, and it was the day that Leopold got liquidated, July 29th. Other than that, it was June 10th, and that was again for a day. Like, we really have been not in a super volatile environment outside of one sector that has obviously, been affected the most in July. Bitcoin crash when futures launched, same thing for AI. That comparison is pretty scary because whenever you productize something and there's that much hype around it, obviously it kind of marks too much euphoria. The difference is with Bitcoin, don't kill me for this, but like there's nothing fundamental. Like there's nothing real. It's magic money on an idea that, and again, I like Bitcoin. I'm just saying, when I look at the way GPUs are utilized in a data center, I see something happening in the world. I feel more productive when I'm using Claude and ChatGPT. With Bitcoin, I'm telling myself that eventually it'll be a hedge to inflation. So I do think there is a difference in the asset class. Get him, chat. Look, I like Bitcoin. It's just, if we're being honest, there's no purpose to it outside of the inflation hedge, which it's failed at doing. I kind of also think if we're going to print all this money, I don't know if Bitcoin ends up being the winner. It's a ticking time bomb of eventually when the market will realize, okay, the US can't keep printing money. Until then, I mean, I don't know if Bitcoin's a hedge. I think Bitcoin's just going to benefit from liquidity, but so will everything else. Stocks are going to benefit too. Like Saylor's chart of his chart of Bitcoin compounding 33% for the past 6 years. I wonder in the next 5 years if he's going to be able to point to BTC as like the best performing asset of all time. Because if that thing just stays flat or goes up, 10, 15%, the volatility that creates all the vitality, it's going to be dead. And if it's not volatile and people are not excited about it, they're going to move on to other stuff. And AI is obviously the next thing to move on to. So, realistically, this thing has to move. Yeah, even gold and silver have failed to be a real hedge against inflation in a meaningful way. I mean, they went up when inflation was the highest this year. Like, it just didn't happen in the way that some people thought it would. Meme coins are getting a lot more attention. I mean, Solana has started to, Solana, Hyperliquid, I mean, these assets or these chains have started to pick up a bit more attention here. But the fact that people are trading meme coins over the majors just shows where the attention has been in the crypto world as well. And meme coins are really exploding, like really exploding. Like meme coins, I don't trade meme coins, but the number 13 app in finance in the United States and number 150 in the entire country in overall apps is FOMO. That is a meme coin social crypto trading app. Number 13, it's ahead of Robinhood. It's ahead of SoFi. Like, meme coins are coming back into attention. I know a lot of us here don't trade them, but they are getting a lot more popularity. And the fact that Bitcoin is not being traded as much as these meme coins is kind of incredible to see where the attention is going. Also known as shitcoins, yes, also known as shitcoins. But people are trading them. If people want to trade them, then they want to trade them. Let's get an update on Iran and Oman and see if there's something we can see here in terms of things changing with this war
going on, and by laying out scenarios. Clearly a base case where we assume that production from the Middle East gradually normalizes in the fourth quarter, which would then put Brent at around 80 in the fourth quarter. But I think the risks to that base case for prices are skewed to the upside, with flows from the Middle East at the moment being pretty low, only around 35% of pre-war levels.
I mean, the Strait is not open now, right? And Brent is at 88. Yep. WTI is at 82. Does that make sense to you?
It's, I think, the most popular question from investors at the moment. I think this reflects two factors. One, the fair value of oil prices based on where inventory levels are relative to demand hasn't risen as much as what analysts and most investors would have thought at the start of the war in the face of the largest supply shock ever. We estimate the fair value at around $80 based on the inventories we can see right now. But that implies that you have a risk premium of less than $10 per barrel, which feels moderate relative to the amount of geopolitical risks and the fact that at the moment the market is clearly in a deficit. And so if we continue on this trajectory, the fair value of oil prices should rise.
In the early days of the war, you would come on and we would talk about convexity, right? Yeah. And the duration and the risk of this taking longer. Things would be more dramatic over time at an increasing rate of drama.
Yeah.
What changed in that story? Was it Chinese buying? Was it our willingness to use SPR or something else?
So what I would argue is that you're actually seeing very high diesel prices. You're seeing very high refined product prices. If you, for instance, look at diesel margins in Europe, the difference between the diesel price and Brent, you reached an all-time high. However, in the crude market, we haven't really seen that convexity, primarily because of the incredible flexibility in Chinese buying. Chinese crude imports collapsed from 13 million barrels per day to 4 million barrels per day at the start of this month. But following the decline in prices, they have backed up to now around 9 million barrels per day. On top of that, on the crude side, we're also seeing pretty strong supply growth outside of the Middle East, especially in America. So it's strong ex-Middle East supply, Chinese price sensitivity of import demand, and actually even within the Middle East, resilient production relative to the collapse in flows.
I wonder if it also says something about better global economic demand than expected. that's keeping prices at these levels?
Demand is clearly recovering. When we look at our various nowcasts of oil demand, you're seeing a pickup in China, in India, in Europe. US gasoline demand is also rising, both for seasonal reasons and because the availability and affordability of oil has improved relative to the start of the war. But I think the key reason why we continue to emphasize to investors that if you want to hedge geopolitical risks, if you want to hedge downside risk to energy supply, we'd rather recommend going long European natural gas and going long diesel products. In the diesel market, the market was structurally tight before the war started, and you have a double whammy. Less diesel supply from the Middle East, but also less supply from Russia. Russia is actually now not an exporter of diesel. They used to be a very large exporter of diesel. At the moment, net exports out of Russia are zero, 70% of Russian refining capacities offline at the moment. And if you look at what happens when Russian refineries go offline, they can't turn the crude into diesel, so they send out more crude to the world and less diesel, which is another reason why we think that the risks of scarcity pricing, of convexity, are greater for diesel than for crude.
The other interesting thing that's happening on the supply side of oil is the Middle East and OPEC said 2 weeks ago they are very ready to increase supply by a few 100,000 barrels of oil per day. So you've got, and obviously the U.S. is drilling aggressively. So you've got plenty of oil entering into the ecosystem. It's just, the ability for it to pass through the Strait of Hormuz has kind of been the natural reason why the supply-demand imbalance continues to be more aggressive towards supply versus demand. And as a result of that, you get higher energy prices. But again, that can be solved kind of easily if we get a deal. And then you have so much supply passing so freely through the strait. I mean, there's a world in which oil really can, it was at 55 before the whole Iran situation happened. So for it to come down and come down aggressively, and then for the Fed to change their entire perspective on rates, I think would be, really exciting to see. By the way, IBM signed a $240 million deal with NVIDIA. We missed this headline this morning. Multi-year $240 million to deploy large-scale AI inference cluster on IBM Cloud using NVIDIA's B300s and Spectrum networking. So that's probably part of the reason IBM is up. Joby also acquired a company called Renaissance Sciences for $500 million. The company generates $100 million in revenue. So Archer bought a company that does $200 million in revenue. Joby buying a company that does $100 million. And you're seeing some of these eVTOL players start to acquire more to be able to grow. Also, private payrolls we have this morning. Employers added an average of 8,000 jobs per week in the 4 weeks through July 25th, down from 21,000 per week in the period ending June 20th. So you are seeing private hiring continue to slow. Ironically, that is a good thing for inflation, a good thing for equities, because that means we don't have as hot of a labor market as Axon hits high of days. But it's not something that necessarily has affected the S&P. Also, a lot of people have been asking about gold. People are getting a lot more exposure to gold through these ETFs. GLD brought in $50 million of inflows just from retail on Wednesday last week. This was the largest daily inflow since March, twice the previous largest daily inflow recorded since early April. Overall, it had 637 million of inflows on Wednesday, which is the largest since June 18th. So you're starting to see retail decide to bet on gold again, and the broader market starting to pick gold as the bet, which is going against some other asset classes like Bitcoin. Bitcoin at the same time lost 140 million of inflows yesterday, so it's kind of been up and down a couple hundred million every other day for BTC. Do you own CoreWeave? Yes, I own CoreWeave. Bought it at 82.17 a few weeks ago. Did not buy the below 70 dip. In terms of the preview on their earnings, so let's actually go through that. We, their earnings, the street's not expecting them to reduce their debt. In fact, I think the street's expecting that they will continue to have more debt. But the problem with them a couple of quarters ago was that it was a supply issue, and there wasn't. It's not like their execution was bad. It's just that they didn't have the ability to get all the supply that they wanted to come online, and the street was upset about it. Last quarter, they actually had amazing numbers. I'm not sure why it took a hit last quarter. Like, I still didn't know what the main reason is. But Wall Street's expecting 2.56 billion of revenue, which would be up 100% year over year. Continue to have their backlog be above 90 billion. It might push up to like 110, 115 billion. And then they expect a net loss of about 122 a share. If they lose a little less than expected, that RPO goes up dramatically, and that RPO is not tied to just OpenAI and Anthropic, and there are supply constraint issues for getting the data centers online. I mean, there was a article last week that, CoreWeave was not the happiest with NVIDIA in terms of being able to actually procure all the GPUs so that they can get them online. If that stuff is kind of ironed out, I think CoreWeave will be fine. And the stock's already down 40% from the highs. So like downside's probably closer to 75. Upside, I think, is 100 after hours if it really has a decent print. And so I think it'll be fine. SMCI is the one that's more interesting because I don't know what they could say to get the street to be more excited. They kind of lost a lot of the pump that they got from the pre-disclosures of their margins. But that'll be an important one as well. Is Robinhood Legend down for anyone else? A couple people I saw complained about that. Maybe it is down today. And if it is, either it's a lot of traffic or that might be something internally that they're trying to fix. Also, they released a dividend tracker for those that are big into dividends. That's officially out now. Any thoughts on Rivian? I'll ask Jason about it today. He's been a fan of Rivian for a long time. This thing got a pump to 20 back in July. I don't love the thesis because their gross margins are still pretty bad. It doesn't look like they're on the track to get massively profitable. I mean, if Tesla's struggling with margins, profitability, and earnings, I don't think Rivian's necessarily the best candidate here. The R2 is cool. Again, I don't know how much they're meaningfully going to sell compared to the other EVs. Also, EVs are kind of dead. Like the hype around electric vehicles is not a big thing anymore. The hype around Tesla has nothing to do with EVs anymore. It has everything to do with Robotaxi and Optimus. So, I know Rivian has its own chip, but it's like, what's so exciting about Rivian outside of them being a car company? And then the question is, can they become a profitable car company, and can RJ execute? And really, the execution over the past couple of years has not been amazing. I think there's so many better opportunities than Rivian that are out there. Having said that, Rivian's a stock that people trade a lot. So the idea that this thing rallies back up to 19 or, has a little bit of a pump on a good catalyst, I think is very, very possible. EV hype, non-US still high. I mean, that's fair. In Malaysia, Singapore, China, obviously with BYD, they're XPeng, that thing was supposed to play out and it didn't really. This thing was like $24 last year. Now it's at 11. But yeah, you're right. In the non-US, there's a lot more excitement around electric vehicles itself. Have you seen Scout Motors? I have not seen Scout Motors. I have not. Gas is also cheaper now, so it's not that big of a deal. Well, yeah, and look, gas has definitely been going up. But it's, it's not like it's $5 a gallon. I've never loved that thesis that high gas prices will get someone to buy a Tesla. It's like, okay, maybe, but I don't know if someone's picking to buy an EV just because of gas prices. I feel like it's a very small minority of people that would actually do that. Where is Lucid? We haven't looked at Lucid in a minute. They had earnings last week. Lucid 665. This one's been relatively flat as well. On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you on day trading now? Say like a 3 or a 4. I mean, I don't know how to judge it, but I think I still have a lot to learn. But I've developed my system. System is working. Starting to get more consistently profitable. Again, it's in a separate trading account. Something that I like to do. The problem is, I think when you say you take a short on something in a day trade, people think you're now short the stock. Like I shorted Rocket Lab last week and made $1,500. And people are like, oh, you hate Rocket Lab now. It's like, no, it's an intraday trade because it was very obvious that Rocket Lab lost every level of support and it was going down. And so I took the trade. I could have been wrong. rklb could have bounced and then squeezed my short, but like, you know, it ended up working out. There's trades that don't work out. But it's hard to like say that you're taking a short or a long on something, because like you might go long Uber today and make some money and people are like, oh, you're bullish Uber. It's like, no, I just think the chart looks good. So, but I like it. It's exciting to me. It's cool. Just tell them you're hedging. Yeah, it's like I have rklb in my long-term portfolio, and then obviously it was really nice when it was at 150, but it probably also didn't deserve to be there. But you know, when it rejected 83 times in a row on Wednesday and SpaceX was falling, it's like, okay, there's a good chance this thing takes a hit, and it took a hit. So there you go. Yesterday was a good day. Made $2,300. rklb, Hood, and Palantir were the winners yesterday. I actually shorted rklb again yesterday. And I was down for a bit, but I was like, dude, I was looking at space. I was like, this shit's coming down, bro. And it came down, but it was only $200. So it wasn't that serious. Palantir was just like a lot of momentum. And so, yeah. No, I don't trade while I'm live. I trade after the stream because I can't focus while I'm streaming and trading. The problem is after the stream, the volume dies down a lot, right? So it's like I have to really be selective and pick my movements. Because look, if you get stuck in a trade, and I've been through this before, not every trade I've had has been profitable, obviously. Like you can at least get, 50 to 60% of those trades to do well, then it's okay. Like I've lost $2,000 in a day as well, right? So for the good trades, there have been bad trades. But I've learned that if you get into a trade and like there's no volume and you like think it's going up and then it ends up going down and there's no volume to support it going back up and it just ends up in a downtrend, like you're screwed. Like this is why people trade from 9:30 to 10:30. That hour is where all the action is, which is why today the price action was so weird, because there was barely any action in the first hour. And that's just because I think it's a boring August day where people are, people are out on vacation. So if you trade at like 11, the benefit to trading post 11:30 is that a structure has developed on a chart and you can have a reasonable interpretation of where that structure is going. Now, then again, Trump might tweet something and mess up everything. Like that stuff has happened as well. Trump actually saved me once. I was trading SPY and I was down and I was just like, all right, I guess I'm and then it just like God candle up and I'm like, oh my goodness, like I've never experienced this. And like negative 2,000 turned into plus 5,000. I'm like, what happened? And that's the day that Trump said, I've changed my mind on bombing Carg Island. And I was like, oh my goodness, this is why all these people are paying for freaking Truth Social, because that candle, like imagine you had tens of millions of dollars in a trade, like that candle would have made you tens of millions of dollars potentially, or hundreds of thousands of dollars in like milliseconds. But like if you've developed a structure after 11:30 or after 10:30 and you can see where the chart somewhat is going and you have little volume, then you have to be right about the structure. Because if you're wrong about the structure, which is kind of the art of knowing how to read the chart, which is not easy, then there's a chance to make some money. But like Epsilera, like would I trade Epsilera right now? No, because like the stock already barely gets volume. A lot of the volume happened when it ran to 10. Maybe it runs back to 10, but I'm taking a pretty big risk right here, trading it after a big rally that it had at 10 o'clock. Now, if I bought it at 10 at 9.50, the run to or at $9.50, the run to $10 would have been the move. But now that it's given up that level, it's not there. What do you like to day trade? Anything that has momentum. I've traded Hood a lot. I've traded Palantir a lot, just because I know those names, so it's easier to trade names. I've traded Micron a bunch. I've shorted Micron a bunch of times. Traded Zeta a bunch of times. Shopify. I've traded SpaceX a ton. Rocket Lab's a great stock to trade. Meta has been great for trading. NVIDIA's tough because it's a couple of dollars every day, so it's hard to predict, and it's just so big to move. But you need something that has volume and that has movement, and then you take your picks. And again, the reason I'm doing this is because I want to have a different repertoire than buy and hold. I think buy and hold is fine, and day trading is not easy, by the way. That's why I'm not teaching it. You can't teach this stuff. Like you can analyze markets, you can teach option selling, but day trading is one of those things where the emotional and psychological rigor that it takes to actually think where the stock is going and then put money behind it in a short time frame. It's definitely not something I could teach. Jason probably, but I'm not that advanced yet. But it is exciting to have a different skill set in the markets. And again, that's why it's a separate account from your long-term account. You put money in there that you could theoretically afford to lose, and you take the risk with it. And then if it ends up working out and you can make a couple $100 extra a day, it's not the worst thing in the world. But it is absolutely hard. And the stats are, it's like 5% of people actually consistently make money doing it. So it's not something that's necessarily easy, but I'm also ingested in markets, right? There's so many times I've taken a day trade where I saw a piece of news and I'm like, oh, I know what that news means because I'm in markets. I'm like, I know that news is bullish or bearish. I can make a trade right here and it's worked, right? So I think the slight edge I have is at least understanding market dynamics enough to use momentum-based catalysts as a way to potentially take some trades. But obviously it's not easy. Is oil still spiking? I've never traded oil. I've never traded futures, I should be honest. I've always stick to just equity. I also don't do options at all. I do not do options at all, just pure stock. Crude's at 83. It is spiking. An advisor to the supreme leader in Iran just tweeted, every time the enemy breaches its commitments and resorts to war again, it will face harsher conditions and greater resilience than before. This time, the punishment of the aggressor continues and the Strait of Hormuz will not be opened until Iran's conditions are met. Whoever does not learn from these experiences of the past will themselves become a lesson for the future. Okay, why not? Take oil to the moon. They're just yapping, bro. They're just yapping. They're literally just yapping, just like me, except what I say doesn't affect 20% of where the world's oil flows from, but they're literally just yapping. Yeah, they're like poetry, bro. Trump's yapping too. They're all just yapping. We just need a solution. And hopefully we get it soon. All right, I think that's it for me, folks. I'll be back on the close. S&P 771.9, red on the day, lows of the day. We'll see where the S&P goes from here, but obviously still relatively red compared to everything else, but just a lot of low volume is what you're seeing right here. Jason does swing trading more than day trading. Yeah, Jason's actually been helping me a lot with this, but Jason's more of an options guy. Like if he thinks in 2 weeks the stock's going to go up, he will lever up with options, and he's been more right than wrong. And that's where you make like 5-6x in a week. Like it's actually not that crazy. If you think you think the stock's going to go up $20 in a week, and you buy a option that's 10% out of the money, it's like boom, it can explode. I am not comfortable with that, nor do I understand enough of the Greeks around options to do that. But when it comes to just equity, it's not the hardest thing to at least understand the dynamics. All right, word of the day. Let's do that. Then we'll be done. After the close, we have TT. We also have CoreWeave. So Tanner and Roy will be streaming CoreWeave, but I will be streaming TT. But we'll obviously cover the results. Also, you have Lumentum, big photonics name, and you have the other one, SMCI. So those are the ones that we have to look at. Did you do a whole series with TJ on options? Yes, it's an options playlist on my channel. I still sell options here and there. TJ sells options more like as an income stream. I still options like periodically and like opportunistically, but I'm not selling options aggressively like he does. But I still think it's a very valuable tool, and it's something that most people can understand very easily versus trying to day trade as much. I think it just takes a lot more time because you're staring at a chart all day, whereas options selling, you can sell a call for a week and look back in a couple of days and just see how the stock reacted. Okay, word of the day. What the heck is this? Enantiodromia. Enantiodromia. The tendency for something pushed too far in one direction to eventually transform into its opposite. The euphoria contained the seeds of its own reversal, an almost perfect example of enantiodromia. I have never heard of this word before. I doubt you guys did as well. Steve did not say this word yesterday. Could you imagine? Steve said this word yesterday. Okay, let's see how to say this word. This is what we're gonna have to spam him with. Let's pull this up. Enantiomia. Grab up 4%. Again, the international stock's getting some love. Just a lot of volume. NVIDIA loses 219. There's just not a lot of action here, folks. Even after that $500 billion announcement, there's just not a ton of action.
Enantiodromia.
Enantiodromia. Okay. That's the word we are spamming Mr. Steve with.
Enantiodromia.
Enantiodromia. There you go. We'll put that in the chat. Dude, song of the day. Are we actually going to make that a thing? Are we actually going to do it? Song of the day? Because then I'm going to have to listen to all these songs and then tell you guys how I think about these songs every single day. Like, I feel like it's going to become too much. And then I might get addicted to them and might start. Like, Bohemian Rhapsody is enough for me, bro. Singing that shit every freaking day at this point. Okay, maybe we'll think of how to format a Song of the Day segment. We'll figure it out. Bohemian Rhapsody every day. Song of the week is better. Song of the week is actually better because then I have a week to listen to it and analyze. But it better be a damn good song, bro. Like, okay, I think Song of the Week is a real thing. It's just got to be a good freaking song. Like, give me another Bohemian Rhapsody every week that I can actually listen to and enjoy. Okay, we'll figure it out. I'll figure it out for tomorrow. We'll figure out how to frame this segment. But Song of the Week, I'll listen to it whatever day of the week we do it, and then I'll give you guys my thoughts the next day. Hopefully you guys educate me on good music. All right, folks. Thank you all for being here. Yes, apparently the dude was gay. So now I get why you guys are laughing so much that I like Freddie Mercury, because apparently he was gay. Like, that's not a reason. Like, I just like, yeah, he happens to be gay. Okay. But now I get why you guys were laughing the other day. Like, of course, a bit like Bohemian Rhapsody. Like, just because, you know, we might share something in common. I'm just kidding. That's just anyway. Thank you all for being here. I'll see you guys on the market close. Technical Tuesday, CoreWeave, Lumentum, and then SMCI. Those are the big ones we got. And we'll be back on the close to discuss it. All right. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you all. I'll see you guys on the market close. Bye, everybody.